The Grey Knights emerged from the darkest hour of the Imperium's history, born from necessity when the galaxy burned with heretical fire and brother turned against brother. During the cataclysmic events of the Horus Heresy, as the War Master's forces carved a bloody path toward Terra itself, the Emperor of Mankind recognized a fundamental flaw in his grand design. The Astartes, his greatest warriors, had proven vulnerable to the insidious corruption of chaos. Even the Primarchs, demigod sons crafted from his own genetic material, had fallen to the ruinous powers. This revelation demanded an unprecedented response, the creation of warriors who would be utterly incorruptible, immune to the whispers and temptations that had damned half the galaxy. The Emperor's contingency plan began to take shape in the deepest vaults beneath the Imperial palace, far from the prying eyes of even his most trusted advisors. Working in absolute secrecy, he began developing new gene seed that would prove resistant to chaos corruption through methods that remain classified even 10 millennia later. This project required not just genetic mastery, but the careful selection of individuals whose souls burned with such purity that no demon could find purchase in their minds. The Emperor understood that creating incorruptible warriors meant more than superior genetics. It demanded recruits whose very essence rejected the fundamental nature of chaos. Malcador the Sigillite, the Emperor's closest confidant and regent of Terra, became the architect of this secret endeavor. The ancient psyker possessed both the political acumen and psychic sensitivity necessary to identify candidates worthy of this ultimate honor. Malcador's task proved monumentally challenging. He needed to find loyalist space marines whose dedication transcended mere duty, warriors whose souls resonated with such purity that they could stand against demons without flinching. The selection process occurred during the height of the heresy, when trust had become a rare commodity and every decision carried the weight of humanity's survival. The Sigillite cast his psychic net across the war-torn galaxy, searching through the ranks of loyalist legions for those rare individuals who possessed the necessary spiritual fortitude. He sought Marines who had not merely remained loyal during the heresy, but who had actively resisted chaos corruption even when exposed to its most potent influences. These warriors needed to demonstrate not just martial prowess, but an absolute rejection of the ruinous powers that went beyond training or indoctrination. Malcador required souls that burned so brightly with purpose that darkness could find no foothold within them. 8 such individuals emerged from this exhaustive search, each representing the pinnacle of what a loyalist space marine could achieve. These warriors came from different legions, their backgrounds spanning the breadth of the Imperium's military might. Some had served in the brutal campaigns of the Great Crusade, witnessing firsthand the horrors that lurked in the galaxy's dark corners. Others had faced chaos corruption directly during the heresy, standing firm when their battle brothers fell to temptation. Each possessed unique skills and perspectives, but all shared an unshakable dedication to the Emperor's vision and an innate resistance to chaos influence. The selection process involved more than battlefield records or psychological profiles. Malcador subjected each candidate to psychic examination, peering into their souls to ensure no trace of corruption existed. He tested their resolve through psychic trials that would have shattered lesser minds, exposing them to controlled manifestations of chaos energy to verify their immunity. These tests occurred in heavily warded chambers deep beneath the Imperial palace, where the screams of the examined could not reach unauthorized ears. Many candidates who initially appeared suitable failed these final examinations, their minds revealing hairline fractures that chaos could eventually exploit. The 8 who passed these trials became the foundation upon which the Grey Knights would be built. Each received the title of Grand Master, though their names have been expunged from all records save those held in the deepest vaults of Titan. These warriors underwent extensive genetic modification, receiving not just the Emperor's new gene seed, but additional psychic conditioning that would make them proof against demonic influence. The process took months, conducted in sterile chambers where the Emperor himself oversaw the most critical procedures. Each Grand Master emerged from this transformation fundamentally changed, their very cellular structure rewritten to reject chaos corruption at the molecular level. While the Grand Masters underwent their transformation, another crucial element of the Emperor's plan took shape. The new chapter would require a fortress monastery unlike any other, a stronghold that could serve as both training ground and sanctuary against the forces of chaos. The Emperor selected Titan, Saturn's largest moon, for this purpose. The choice proved strategically brilliant. Titan's location in the Sol system provided proximity to Terra while offering the isolation necessary for absolute secrecy. The moon's harsh environment and existing Imperial facilities made it an ideal candidate for conversion into an impregnable fortress. The transformation of Titan began immediately, with entire armies of Adeptus Mechanicus Tech adepts and Imperial Fists construction specialists working around the clock. They carved vast chambers from the moon's icy surface, creating training halls where future Grey Knights could practice their deadly arts. Massive libraries rose from the excavated depths, designed to house the most dangerous knowledge in the Imperium's possession. Forges capable of producing the specialized equipment these warriors would require took shape, their furnaces burning with flames that could purify even demonically tainted materials. The fortress monasteries designed incorporated elements that defied conventional architecture. Psychic wards were built into the very foundations, creating barriers that would prevent demonic infiltration. Sacred geometries influenced every corridor and chamber, their patterns based on mathematical principles that disrupted chaos energy. The facility's power systems drew upon technologies that the Adeptus Mechanicus would later classify as archaeotech, their origins lost to all but the Emperor himself. Every surface bore inscriptions in languages that predated human civilization, words of power that strengthened the fortress's defenses against supernatural threats. As construction progressed, the Emperor made a decision that would define the Grey Knights' future operations. He assigned them the designation of the 666th chapter, a number that carried profound symbolic weight. This designation served multiple purposes. It identified them as the ultimate weapon against chaos, while simultaneously marking them as apart from the standard Codex Astartes organization. The number itself became a ward against demonic influence, its triple repetition creating a psychic barrier that demons found difficult to overcome. More significantly, the Emperor ordered the complete removal of all Grey Knights records from Imperial archives. This decision went far beyond simple classification. It represented a total erasure of their existence from official documentation. The chapter would operate in absolute secrecy, unknown to all but the highest levels of Imperial command. Even the Inquisition, when it eventually formed, would initially remain ignorant of the Grey Knights' existence. This secrecy served both practical and mystical purposes, protecting the chapter from chaos infiltration while allowing them to operate without political interference. The implementation of this information blackout required unprecedented coordination across the Imperial bureaucracy. Scribes who had worked on Grey Knights' documentation disappeared, their memories wiped by psychic conditioning. Data banks were purged of all references to the chapter, their storage crystals physically destroyed to prevent recovery. Even the Adeptus Mechanicus forge worlds that produced their equipment received memory-locked protocols that would prevent them from retaining knowledge of their clients. The Emperor's psychic influence ensured that those involved in the project would forget their participation once their tasks were complete. As the Horus Heresy reached its climax and traitor forces prepared their final assault on Terra, the Grey Knights faced their first and perhaps greatest test. Horus's fleet had entered the Sol system, bringing with it not just heretical space marines, but legions of demons summoned from the warp. The presence of so many chaos entities threatened to tear reality apart, creating warp storms that could consume Terra itself. In this moment of supreme crisis, Malcador made a decision that would echo through 10,000 years of Imperial history. The Sigillite gathered his remaining strength, and with the Emperor's blessing, enacted a feat of psychic manipulation that defied comprehension. As traitor forces closed on Terra, Titan simply vanished from real space. The entire moon, along with its newly constructed fortress monastery and the 8 Grand Masters within, was transported directly into the warp. This was not mere teleportation. Malcador had created a stable pocket of reality within the Sea of Souls itself, a sanctuary where the Grey Knights could complete their training while the galaxy burned around them. The psychic effort required for this feat proved enormous, contributing significantly to Malcador's eventual death during the final stages of the heresy. The Sigillite channeled decades of accumulated power into the working, drawing upon wards and protections he had spent centuries preparing. The transportation occurred at the precise moment when the warp around Terra reached maximum turbulence, allowing Titan to slip between dimensions without alerting the chaos forces to its departure. From the perspective of observers on Terra, Saturn's largest moon simply ceased to exist, leaving only empty space where it had orbited for millions of years. Within the warp, Titan existed in a state of temporal flux that allowed accelerated training and preparation. The 8 Grand Masters used this time to establish the doctrines and traditions that would guide their chapter for millennia to come. They studied the most forbidden texts in the Emperor's collection, learning the true names of greater demons and the rituals necessary to banish them. Each Grand Master developed specializations that would become the foundation of the chapter's organization. Some focused on combating specific types of demon, while others perfected the psychic techniques that would become the Grey Knight's signature abilities. The fortress monastery continued its construction even within the warp, as the Grand Masters shaped their new home according to their growing understanding of their mission. They established the training regimens that would forge future generations of demon hunters, creating trials that would test both martial skill and spiritual purity. The great libraries expanded as they recorded their discoveries, building archives of anti-demon lore that would prove invaluable in the dark millennium to come. Workshops produced the first examples of the specialized equipment that would become standard Grey Knight's wargear, each item blessed with wards against chaos corruption. The gene seed that would give birth to the Grey Knights represented a fundamental departure from the genetic templates that had created the original Space Marine legions. While the Emperor had crafted the Primarchs and their legion gene seed from his own genetic material, the corruption of half his sons during the Horus Heresy revealed catastrophic flaws in this approach. The new gene seed required a different foundation, one that could resist the insidious touch of chaos at the most basic cellular level. Imperial records, those few that survived the systematic purges that followed, suggest the Emperor drew upon genetic material that predated even the Primarch project, utilizing sequences that had remained untouched in the deepest vaults beneath the Imperial palace. The most persistent theories among the handful of individuals with sufficient clearance to speculate suggest the Grey Knight's gene seed derives directly from the Emperor himself, bypassing the Primarch intermediaries entirely. This would explain the chapter's remarkable resistance to chaos corruption, as their genetic foundation lacks the vulnerabilities that allowed the ruinous powers to corrupt the Primarchs and their legions. The Emperor's own genetic code, refined through millennia of psychic evolution and carefully guarded against contamination, would provide the perfect template for warriors designed to face demons without fear of corruption. The creation process began with the identification of suitable candidates, a task that required psychic sensitivity far beyond normal recruitment protocols. Unlike standard Space Marine chapters that could draw from planetary populations based on physical prowess and basic psychological screening, the Grey Knights needed recruits whose souls possessed an inherent resistance to chaos influence. This selection process operated on multiple levels simultaneously, examining not just the candidate's current mental state, but their fundamental spiritual architecture. Malcador the Sigillite established the initial recruitment criteria during the chapter's founding, drawing upon his vast psychic abilities to identify the specific traits that would prove essential. Candidates needed to demonstrate not merely loyalty or courage, but an active rejection of corruption that manifested at the deepest levels of their psyche. The Sigillite screening process involved direct psychic contact with potential recruits, a dangerous procedure that could permanently damage lesser minds. Those who survived this initial examination faced additional trials designed to stress test their resistance to chaos influence. The recruitment net cast by the early Grey Knights operated across the entire galaxy, though always in absolute secrecy. Unlike other chapters that maintained visible recruitment worlds or established relationships with planetary governments, the Grey Knights identified candidates through methods that left no trace of their involvement. Psychically gifted children who demonstrated the necessary spiritual purity simply vanished from their homes, their disappearance attributed to accidents, predator attacks, or simple abandonment. Imperial records were altered to erase all evidence of their existence, creating gaps in documentation that even the most thorough investigation could not bridge. Many candidates came from populations that had already faced chaos corruption and emerged unscathed. Children who had witnessed demonic incursions without succumbing to madness or despair proved particularly valuable, as their exposure had already tested their spiritual defenses. Others were identified among the populations of worlds that had successfully resisted chaos cults, their communities having developed natural resistance to corruption through generations of struggle. The recruitment process also drew from the ranks of nascent psychers who had demonstrated unusual control over their abilities, particularly those who showed instinctive revulsion toward the warp's darker aspects. The trials that awaited these candidates made the standard Space Marine selection process appear gentle by comparison. The Grey Knights needed to ensure that their recruits could withstand not just physical hardship, but direct exposure to chaos energy without corruption. The initial trials took place in specially constructed chambers within Titan's Fortress Monastery, their walls inscribed with protective wards that could contain demonic manifestations while preventing them from permanently harming the candidates. Recruits faced controlled exposure to minor demons, their reactions carefully monitored by the chapter's librarians and chaplains. Those who showed fear were not necessarily eliminated, as fear represented a natural and healthy response to supernatural threats. However, candidates who displayed fascination, curiosity about forbidden knowledge, or any sign of spiritual weakness were immediately removed from the program. The trials escalated in intensity over months of testing, exposing candidates to increasingly powerful manifestations of chaos energy while measuring their psychological and spiritual responses. Physical trials complemented these spiritual tests, but with modifications that reflected the chapter's unique mission. Candidates learned to fight while maintaining perfect mental discipline, engaging in combat exercises that required them to recite protective litanies while facing multiple opponents. They practiced weapon forms that incorporated psychic focusing techniques, training their minds to channel power through their bodies without losing control. The trials included exposure to environments that simulated the reality warping effects of demonic presence, teaching recruits to maintain their sense of identity and purpose, even when the laws of physics became unreliable. The surgical implantation of Astartes organs in Grey Knights candidates followed protocols that had been extensively modified from standard procedures. Each organ received additional psychic conditioning during the implantation process, with the chapter's apothecaries working alongside librarians to ensure that the new tissue would resist chaos corruption. The process took significantly longer than standard Space Marine creation, as each organ required individual blessing and warding before integration into the candidate's body. The secondary heart received particular attention during implantation, as this organ would need to pump blood that had been psychically treated to resist demonic influence. The apothecaries infused the heart tissue with microscopic silver particles, their molecular structure arranged in patterns that disrupted chaos energy at the cellular level. The organ's muscle fibers were conditioned with protective mantras during the healing process, creating a biological pump that would actively resist corruption with every beat. The os medulla and biascopia, responsible for bone and muscle development respectively, underwent extensive modification to accommodate the psychic stresses that Grey Knights would face in combat. The bones that grew from the os medulla's influence contained trace amounts of sanctified materials, creating a skeletal structure that could channel psychic energy without fracturing under the strain. The enhanced muscles produced by the biascopia were conditioned to respond to psychic commands, allowing Grey Knights to channel their powers through physical movement with devastating effect. The catalepsian node, which normally allowed Space Marines to remain conscious while portions of their brain rested, received additional psychic conditioning to prevent demonic infiltration during these vulnerable periods. The organ was modified to maintain constant low-level protective barriers around the recruit's mind, ensuring that even during rest periods, their thoughts remained shielded from chaos influence. This modification proved essential, as demons often attempted to corrupt their enemies through dreams and subconscious manipulation. The preomner and multi-lung systems underwent extensive reconstruction to allow Grey Knights to survive in environments where reality itself had become unstable. The preomner received additional filtering capabilities designed to neutralize demonic toxins and reality-warping substances that could poison normal Space Marines. The multi-lung was enhanced with organs that could extract oxygen from environments where the fundamental laws of chemistry had been altered by chaos influence. Most significantly, the black carapace implantation involved the integration of psychically conductive materials that would allow the Grey Knight's power armor to function as an extension of their psychic abilities. The interface between warrior and armor became far more sophisticated than in standard Space Marine equipment, creating a symbiotic relationship that amplified the wearer's psychic potential while providing additional protection against demonic attack. The carapace itself was inscribed with microscopic protective wards, their patterns etched into the organic material at the molecular level. The psycho-indoctrination process that followed surgical implantation represented perhaps the most radical departure from standard Space Marine creation protocols. Where normal chapters focused on instilling loyalty, discipline, and tactical knowledge, the Grey Knights required indoctrination that would make corruption literally impossible. This process involved the systematic reconstruction of the recruit's personality and memory, creating warriors whose very identity was built around resistance to chaos. The indoctrination began with memory conditioning that selectively edited the recruit's past experiences, removing or modifying memories that could provide emotional leverage for demonic corruption. Traumatic experiences that might create psychological vulnerabilities were either erased entirely or recontextualized within a framework of spiritual strength. Happy memories that could be used to create false hope or manipulate the warrior's emotions were similarly modified, their emotional impact reduced to prevent exploitation. This memory conditioning went far beyond simple deletion or modification. The Grey Knights librarians worked with each recruit to construct entirely new memory frameworks that would support their mission against chaos. False memories of spiritual triumph and resistance to temptation were carefully implanted, creating a psychological foundation that would remain stable even under extreme duress. The process required months of careful work, as each memory needed to be perfectly integrated with the recruit's existing personality to prevent psychological fragmentation. The indoctrination process included extensive education in demonic lore, but presented in a manner that prevented corruption through knowledge. Recruits learned the true names and capabilities of greater demons, but this information was packaged within protective mental frameworks that prevented the knowledge from becoming a pathway for corruption. They studied the rituals and practices of chaos cults, but always from the perspective of identifying and countering these threats rather than understanding their appeal. Spiritual conditioning formed the core of the indoctrination process, creating mental barriers that would automatically activate when exposed to chaos influence. The recruits' minds were restructured around a series of protective mantras and prayers, their thought patterns guided into configurations that naturally resisted demonic manipulation. This conditioning operated at levels below conscious awareness, creating automatic responses that would protect the warrior even if their conscious mind became overwhelmed. The final stage of creation involved the implantation of specialized psychic organs unique to the Grey Knights. These organs, whose existence remained classified at the highest levels of Imperial security, allowed the chapter's warriors to channel psychic energy with unprecedented precision and power. The organs were grown from genetic templates that the Emperor had personally designed, their cellular structure incorporating elements that existed partially outside normal space-time. These psychic organs created a direct connection between the Grey Knight's consciousness and the Emperor's psychic presence in the warp, establishing a link that would remain active throughout the warrior's service. This connection provided both power and protection, allowing the Grey Knight to draw upon the Emperor's strength while remaining shielded from direct chaos influence. The organs also served as a fail-safe mechanism, automatically severing the warrior's connection to the warp if corruption was detected, preventing the spread of taint to other members of the chapter. The completed Grey Knights emerged from this creation process as beings that transcended normal human limitations while remaining utterly incorruptible. Their genetic structure had been fundamentally altered to reject chaos influence, their memories and personalities reconstructed to eliminate psychological vulnerabilities, and their bodies enhanced with organs that allowed them to channel psychic power with devastating effectiveness. These warriors represented the culmination of the Emperor's genetic mastery, combining the physical prowess of the Astartes with spiritual purity that could withstand any demonic assault. The psychic architecture that protected the Grey Knights from chaos corruption operated on multiple levels simultaneously, creating a defensive matrix that began at the genetic level and extended into the immaterial realm of the warp itself. Unlike the psychic hoods and force weapons employed by standard Space Marine librarians, the Grey Knights' protection was woven into their very existence through the Emperor's direct intervention during their creation. This inherent resistance manifested not as a simple barrier against demonic influence, but as an active rejection system that treated chaos energy as a foreign substance to be expelled from their bodies and minds. The gene seed modifications that created this resistance involved alterations to the warriors' neural pathways that fundamentally changed how their brains processed psychic energy. Where normal humans and even standard Astartes possessed minds that could be gradually worn down by persistent chaos influence, the Grey Knight's neural architecture actively reinforced itself when exposed to corruption. Their synaptic patterns had been restructured to create feedback loops that strengthened their mental defenses with each attempted breach, turning demonic attacks into sources of increased spiritual fortification. This biological immunity extended to their cellular structure, where microscopic silver particles integrated during the gene seed implantation process created a molecular-level barrier against chaos corruption. These particles, blessed through rituals that predated the Imperium's founding, formed crystalline matrices within the warrior's bloodstream that disrupted demonic energy at its most fundamental level. When exposed to warp-based attacks, these silver matrices would resonate with protective frequencies that actively purged corruption from the Grey Knight system, creating a cleansing effect that could neutralize even the most potent demonic toxins. The psychic resistance also manifested in the Grey Knight's ability to remain cognitively functional in environments where reality itself had become unstable. While normal humans exposed to significant warp disturbances would experience hallucinations, memory loss, or complete psychological breakdown, Grey Knights maintained perfect clarity of thought and purpose. Their minds processed the contradictory sensory input of reality-warped environments through specialized neural filters that separated genuine threats from demonic illusions, allowing them to fight effectively even when the laws of physics had been temporarily suspended. This inherent protection created a unique relationship between the Grey Knights and the Warp that differed fundamentally from other psyker organizations within the Imperium. Where astropaths required extensive soul-binding rituals to safely channel psychic energy, and Space Marine librarians relied on decades of training and external protective equipment, the Grey Knights accessed their powers through a direct connection to the Emperor's psychic presence that bypassed many of the traditional dangers associated with warp manipulation. This connection operated through the specialized psychic organs implanted during their creation, creating a conduit that allowed them to draw power while remaining insulated from the warp's corrupting influence. The sanctic discipline that formed the foundation of Grey Knight's psychic combat represented a completely unique approach to battlefield psykers that had been developed specifically for anti-demon warfare. Unlike the diverse psychic schools taught to standard librarians, which drew their power from various aspects of the warp's chaotic nature, the sanctic discipline channeled energy exclusively through the Emperor's divine essence. This fundamental difference meant that Grey Knight's psychic powers carried an inherent sanctity that was anathema to demonic entities, causing their abilities to inflict spiritual as well as physical damage on chaos creatures. The discipline's techniques had been codified by the original 8 Grand Masters during Titan's exile in the Warp, drawing upon knowledge that the Emperor had personally imparted to them before the chapter's founding. Each technique was designed to serve dual purposes in combat, providing tactical advantages while simultaneously disrupting the reality warping effects that demons used to maintain their presence in real space. The powers operated through carefully structured mental frameworks that prevented the wielder from accidentally opening their mind to chaos influence while channeling energy, creating a system of psychic combat that was both devastatingly effective and completely safe for the practitioner. Hammerhand, perhaps the most fundamental technique in the sanctic arsenal, exemplified the discipline's approach to combining spiritual purity with devastating combat effectiveness. The power allowed Grey Knights to channel blessed energy directly through their weapons and fists, creating impacts that resonated with divine force capable of shattering demonic forms. When activated, the technique caused the warrior's hands and weapons to glow with silver-white radiance that burned with the Emperor's own psychic signature, turning every strike into a blessed blow that could disrupt a demon's connection to the material plane. The activation of Hammerhand required the Grey Knight to focus their consciousness through a series of protective mantras while simultaneously channeling power through their enhanced nervous system. The technique drew energy from the specialized psychic organs implanted during their creation, routing it through neural pathways that had been specifically modified to handle divine essence without corruption. The power manifested as crackling energy that surrounded the warrior's weapons, creating a field of sanctified force that could penetrate demonic defenses that would turn aside normal weapons entirely. In combat, Hammerhand transformed the Grey Knight's already formidable close combat capabilities into something approaching the divine. Their nemesis force weapons, already deadly to demonic entities, became instruments of absolute destruction when enhanced by the technique. The power allowed them to shatter greater demon claws that could turn aside tank shells, punch through reality warped armor that existed partially outside normal space, and deliver killing blows to entities whose very existence defied the laws of physics. The technique's effectiveness scaled with the wielder's psychic strength, allowing veteran Grey Knights to channel enough power to destroy multiple lesser demons with a single enhanced strike. Sanctuary represented the defensive counterpart to Hammerhand's offensive capabilities, creating protective barriers that could shield Grey Knights and their allies from both physical and psychic attacks. The technique generated fields of blessed energy that surrounded the practitioner and nearby allies, creating zones of sanctified space that demons found extremely difficult to penetrate. Unlike the static barriers produced by conversion fields or refractor shields, Sanctuary created dynamic protection that adapted to incoming threats, strengthening automatically against demonic attacks while remaining permeable to friendly fire. The power's manifestation took the form of shimmering barriers of silver light that rippled and flowed around the protected individuals, their surfaces inscribed with constantly shifting protective runes drawn from the Emperor's personal lexicon of power. These barriers operated on multiple levels simultaneously, providing physical deflection against material attacks while creating psychic interference that disrupted demonic targeting and reality warping abilities. The technique proved particularly effective against the exotic weapons employed by greater demons, whose attacks often combined physical force with reality-altering effects that could bypass conventional armor entirely. Sanctuary's protective effects extended beyond simple damage mitigation to include resistance against demonic special abilities such as fear projection, mind control, and corruption auras. The blessed energy field created by the technique acted as a psychic insulator that prevented hostile mental influences from reaching the protected individuals, allowing them to maintain perfect clarity and determination even when facing the most terrifying manifestations of chaos. This aspect of the power proved invaluable when fighting alongside normal Imperial forces, as it allowed mortal soldiers to remain effective in combat situations that would otherwise reduce them to gibbering madness. The technique's area of effect could be expanded through concentrated effort, allowing experienced practitioners to protect entire squads or even small formations of allied troops. Master-level Grey Knights could maintain sanctuary barriers large enough to shield Rhino transports or provide safe zones for evacuation operations in demon-infested areas. The power's duration was limited only by the practitioner's psychic endurance and concentration, though maintaining large-scale barriers for extended periods required considerable mental discipline and could leave the wielder temporarily drained. Gate of Infinity represented perhaps the most tactically versatile technique in the Sanctic discipline, allowing Grey Knights to traverse vast distances instantaneously through controlled manipulation of space-time. Unlike the dangerous teleportation methods employed by other Imperial forces, which risked scattering or corruption during transit, Gate of Infinity created stable passages through sanctified regions of the warp that were protected by the Emperor's divine presence. The technique allowed for precise battlefield repositioning that could turn the tide of combat against demonic forces whose own reality warping abilities made conventional tactics ineffective. The power's activation required the Grey Knight to visualize their destination with perfect clarity while channeling energy through neural pathways specifically modified to handle dimensional manipulation. The technique created temporary rifts in space-time that appeared as doorways of brilliant silver light, their edges crackling with protective energy that prevented demonic entities from following or intercepting the transit. The passages existed for only seconds, but provided absolutely safe transportation that deposited the Grey Knights at their intended destination without the risk of mishap that plagued other teleportation methods. In combat applications, Gate of Infinity allowed Grey Knights to appear directly behind enemy lines, emerge from unexpected angles to deliver devastating surprise attacks, or rapidly redeploy to counter demonic flanking maneuvers. The technique proved particularly effective against greater demons, whose massive size and reality warping abilities made conventional approaches extremely dangerous. Grey Knights could use the power to strike at vulnerable points on demon princes or bloodthirsters, deliver precision attacks against summoning circles, or extract wounded allies from positions that had become untenable. The strategic applications of Gate of Infinity extended far beyond tactical combat maneuvers to include rapid response capabilities that allowed Grey Knights to intervene in demonic incursions across vast distances. Strike forces could deploy from Titan directly to threatened worlds without requiring conventional transportation, arriving at crisis points with perfect timing to prevent demonic breakthroughs. The technique also enabled extraction operations that could remove critical personnel or artifacts from demon-controlled areas without risking prolonged exposure to chaos corruption. Within the Grey Knights organization, librarians held the specialized role of prognosticars, combining their enhanced psychic abilities with prophetic techniques that allowed them to predict demonic incursions before they occurred. These warrior mystics possessed psychic sensitivity that exceeded even the considerable abilities of their battle brothers, their minds attuned to the subtle fluctuations in the warp that preceded major demonic manifestations. The prognosticars served as the chapter's early warning system, their visions and divinations providing the intelligence necessary to position Grey Knights' forces where they would be most needed. The prophetic abilities of the prognosticars operated through direct communion with the Emperor's psychic presence, their enhanced consciousness able to perceive patterns in the warp's chaotic currents that revealed future events. Unlike the uncertain and often corrupted visions experienced by standard Imperial psychers, the prognosticars' prophecies carried divine clarity that made them remarkably accurate and actionable. Their predictions took the form of detailed visions that showed specific locations, times, and circumstances of impending demonic incursions, allowing the Grey Knights to prepare appropriate responses and deploy forces with surgical precision. The training required to become a prognosticar involved decades of meditation and psychic conditioning that pushed even the Grey Knight's enhanced minds to their limits. Candidates underwent intensive preparation that included exposure to controlled prophetic trances, during which they learned to navigate the treacherous currents of future sight without losing their sanity or spiritual purity. The process required perfect mental discipline, as the visions of future demonic incursions could be psychologically devastating even for warriors specifically created to face such horrors. Prognosticars developed specialized techniques for interpreting and communicating their visions that ensured critical intelligence reached operational commanders without delay or distortion. Their prophecies were recorded using sacred ciphers that protected the information from demonic interference, while allowing authorized personnel to decode and act upon the intelligence. The most urgent predictions were transmitted directly through psychic communion with other Grey Knights leaders, creating an information network that could coordinate responses across multiple star systems simultaneously. The collective psychic phenomena that emerged when Grey Knights fought together as cohesive units represented one of their most devastating capabilities against demonic forces. Unlike normal Space Marine squads, whose individual abilities simply added together, Grey Knights could link their psychic potential to create effects that far exceeded the sum of their parts. This Brotherhood-wide channeling allowed them to generate psychic attacks of unprecedented power, create protective barriers that could shield entire formations, and perform mass teleportation that could redeploy complete strike forces instantaneously. The foundation for these collective abilities lay in the psychic resonance created by their shared gene seed and spiritual conditioning. All Grey Knights possessed neural patterns that had been modified according to the same divine template, creating natural harmonics that allowed their psychic abilities to synchronize automatically when fighting in proximity. This resonance operated below the level of conscious control, manifesting as an instinctive coordination that enhanced every aspect of their combat performance, from weapon accuracy to tactical awareness. When Grey Knights focused their collective psychic might, the resulting phenomena could reshape entire battlefields through the application of sanctified power. Strike squads could channel their combined abilities to create devastating psychic storms that swept across demon formations, each bolt of energy carrying enough blessed force to banish multiple lesser entities. Terminator squads could generate protective domes that rendered entire areas impassable to demonic forces, creating safe zones where Imperial allies could regroup and coordinate their own attacks. The most powerful manifestations of collective psychic might occurred when entire brotherhoods coordinated their abilities under the guidance of a Grand Master. These large-scale phenomena could alter the fundamental nature of reality across significant areas, temporarily sanctifying corrupted ground, purging demonic taint from infected populations, or creating barriers between dimensions that prevented further demonic incursions. The power requirements for such feats were enormous, often leaving participating Grey Knights temporarily drained, but the strategic impact could determine the outcome of entire campaigns against chaos forces. The weapons wielded by the Grey Knights represented the pinnacle of the Imperium's anti-demon technology, each piece forged through processes that combined ancient knowledge with divine blessing to create instruments capable of harming entities that existed partially outside reality itself. These sacred armaments drew their power not merely from superior craftsmanship or exotic materials, but from their fundamental attunement to the psychic energies that flowed through every Grey Knight. The weapons served as conduits for the Emperor's divine will, channeling blessed force through carefully crafted matrices that could wound demons at the spiritual level, while simultaneously disrupting their connection to the material plane. The Nemesis force weapons that formed the core of Grey Knight's armament operated on principles that differed fundamentally from the force weapons employed by standard Space Marine librarians. While conventional force weapons required active psychic channeling to achieve their full effectiveness, Nemesis weapons maintained a constant low-level connection to their wielder's psychic potential through microscopic circuits etched into their molecular structure. These circuits, inscribed with protective runes in languages that predated human civilization, created resonance patterns that automatically synchronized with the Grey Knight's neural activity, transforming every strike into a spiritually charged attack. The forging process for Nemesis weapons began in the deepest chambers of Titan's Fortress Monastery, where master artificers worked alongside the chapter's most powerful librarians to create blades that could channel divine energy without corruption. Each weapon started as a core of blessed silver that had been purified through rituals lasting months, its molecular structure gradually altered through exposure to sanctified energies until it achieved perfect psychic conductivity. The silver was then layered with adamantium that had been consecrated in the Emperor's name, creating a composite material that combined supernatural effectiveness with the durability necessary for sustained combat against greater demons. The most common variant of Nemesis weapon, the Nemesis Force Sword, balanced cutting power with psychic channeling efficiency in a design that had remained unchanged since the chapter's founding. The blade's geometry incorporated sacred mathematical ratios that optimized the flow of blessed energy from hilt to point, creating a weapon that could deliver devastating psychic attacks while maintaining perfect balance for conventional swordplay. The crossguard and pommel contained focusing crystals grown in Titan's sanctified chambers, their crystalline matrices attuned to specific frequencies that enhanced the wielder's psychic abilities while providing additional protection against demonic counterattacks. When activated by a Grey Knight's psychic potential, the Nemesis Force Sword became wreathed in silver fire that burned with the Emperor's own divine essence. This energy field extended several inches beyond the physical blade, creating an effective cutting edge that could slice through demonic hide that would turn aside power weapons and melt to charges. The psychic flame carried properties that disrupted the reality warping fields that protected greater demons, allowing the weapon to inflict wounds that would heal normally on mortal flesh, but remained permanently damaging to entities sustained by warp energy. The Nemesis Force Halberd represented a variation designed for warriors who favored reach and leverage over the sword's versatility. The weapon's extended handle allowed Grey Knights to engage larger demonic entities while maintaining safe distance from their claws and reality warping auras. The halberd's blade incorporated additional psychic focusing elements that concentrated the wielder's power into devastating thrusting attacks capable of piercing even the thickest demonic armor. The weapon's balance point was carefully calculated to allow rapid transitions between offensive strikes and defensive parries, making it particularly effective against demon princes, whose massive size and strength could overwhelm conventional close combat techniques. Master-crafted variants of the Nemesis halberd included extended psychic matrices that ran the full length of the weapon's handle, allowing experienced warriors to channel power through the entire weapon simultaneously. This enhancement created halberds that could deliver psychically charged strikes with both blade and butt spike, turning the entire weapon into a conduit for blessed energy. The most legendary examples incorporated fragments of the Emperor's own armor recovered from the Imperial palace, their presence transforming already formidable weapons into artifacts capable of banishing greater demons with single strikes. The Nemesis Demon Hammer stood as the most specialized variant of force weapon, designed specifically for combating the largest and most powerful demonic entities. The weapon's massive head contained psychic focusing chambers that could store and release enormous amounts of blessed energy in single devastating impacts. Unlike the continuous energy fields generated by swords and halberds, demon hammers channeled their power in concentrated bursts that could shatter the reality anchors that allowed greater demons to maintain their presence in normal space-time. The hammer's construction required techniques that pushed even Titan's master artificers to their limits, as the weapon needed to contain psychic energies that could destroy lesser materials through simple proximity. The head was forged from a single piece of blessed adamantium that had been shaped using tools consecrated specifically for the purpose, their surfaces inscribed with protective wards that prevented the metal from rejecting the divine energies it would channel. The handle incorporated shock-absorbing elements that protected the wielder from the tremendous forces generated during combat, as demon hammer strikes could produce impacts equivalent to artillery shells when enhanced by psychic power. When wielded by veteran Grey Knights, demon hammers could deliver blows that resonated through multiple dimensions simultaneously, striking at demons' physical forms while simultaneously attacking their spiritual essence in the warp. The weapons proved particularly effective against demon engines and other mechanical constructs animated by bound entities, as their psychic disruption could sever the connections between machine and demon, while their physical impact destroyed the material components. The sight of a Grey Knight Terminator advancing with an activated demon hammer had become synonymous with certain doom for even the mightiest servants of chaos. The storm bolters carried by Grey Knights represented significant improvements over the standard patterns employed by other Imperial forces, incorporating blessed ammunition and psychically enhanced targeting systems that made them devastatingly effective against demonic entities. These weapons fired rounds that had been consecrated through rituals that imbued each bolt with protective wards capable of disrupting demonic defenses. The ammunition manufacturing process took place in sanctified chambers, where each round was individually blessed and inscribed with microscopic runes that activated upon impact, turning conventional mass reactive shells into spiritually charged projectiles. The Storm Bolter's dual-barrel design allowed for sustained fire that could suppress even large groups of lesser demons, while the wielder advanced to close combat range. The weapon's ammunition feeds incorporated purification systems that blessed each round as it entered the firing chamber, ensuring that every shot carried maximum spiritual effectiveness against chaos entities. The bolter's machine spirit had been specially conditioned to recognize demonic targets, providing targeting assistance that helped Grey Knights maintain accuracy even when facing entities that existed partially outside normal space-time. Specialized ammunition variants included sanctified rounds designed for specific types of demonic entity, their blessed cores tailored to exploit particular vulnerabilities in chaos creatures. Anti-demon rounds contained silver cores that had been blessed with specific prayers effective against the target demon's patron deity, creating ammunition that could banish lesser entities outright while inflicting severe spiritual damage on more powerful creatures. Exorcism rounds incorporated fragments of sacred texts written in High Gothic, their impact releasing bursts of holy energy that disrupted possession attempts and forced bound demons from their host bodies. The sight cannon represented the Grey Knight's primary heavy weapon, combining the firepower necessary to threaten greater demons with psychic enhancement systems that made it uniquely effective against entities sustained by warp energy. Unlike conventional heavy bolters that relied purely on kinetic impact and explosive force, sight cannons fired projectiles that had been psychically charged to resonate with demonic essence. The weapon's firing mechanism incorporated focusing crystals that channeled the wielder's psychic potential into each shot, creating rounds that carried both physical and spiritual striking power. The sight cannon's distinctive appearance reflected its specialized nature, with psychic conductors running along the barrel's length and focusing arrays positioned around the muzzle to shape the spiritual energy that enhanced each shot. The weapon's ammunition consisted of specially crafted shells that contained cores of blessed silver surrounded by adamantium penetrators, their combined impact capable of piercing demonic hide while delivering payloads of sanctified energy directly into the target's spiritual matrix. The firing process created distinctive silver muzzle flashes that announced the weapon's presence across battlefields, their light-carrying properties that caused physical pain to nearby demons. When operated by experienced Grey Knights, sight cannons could maintain sustained fire that created corridors of blessed energy capable of holding back entire demon hordes. The weapon's psychic enhancement systems allowed it to adapt automatically to different types of demonic target, adjusting the spiritual frequency of its ammunition to exploit specific vulnerabilities in chaos entities. Master-crafted variants incorporated additional focusing elements that allowed them to fire concentrated bursts capable of seriously wounding greater demons, their enhanced ammunition carrying enough spiritual force to disrupt even the strongest reality anchors. The Aegis pattern Terminator armor worn by Grey Knights veterans represented the ultimate fusion of physical protection and spiritual warding, creating suits that could shield their occupants from both conventional weapons and the reality-warping attacks employed by greater demons. Each suit was individually crafted in Titan's forges, using techniques that had been developed specifically for anti-demon warfare, incorporating protective elements that went far beyond the already formidable defenses of standard Terminator armor. The suits served as mobile sanctuaries that allowed their wearers to operate in environments where the presence of powerful demons had fundamentally altered the nature of reality itself. The armor's construction began with ceramite plates that had been blessed through month-long rituals, their molecular structure gradually altered through exposure to sanctified energies until they achieved resistance to both physical and psychic attacks. Each plate was inscribed with protective wards using tools that had been consecrated specifically for the purpose, their surfaces covered with microscopic runes that created overlapping fields of spiritual protection. The inscriptions were applied using silver ink that had been mixed with blessed oils, creating permanent markings that would continue to provide protection even if the armor's power systems failed. The suit's internal systems incorporated psychic dampening fields that protected the wearer from mental attacks while enhancing their own psychic abilities through resonance amplification. The armor's machine spirit had been specially conditioned to recognize and resist demonic influence, its programming incorporating protective protocols that would automatically seal the suit and activate emergency systems if corruption was detected. The life support systems included purification elements that could cleanse air and water of demonic taint, allowing Grey Knights to operate in environments that would prove lethal to warriors in conventional armor. The Aegis armor's most distinctive feature was its integrated psychic hood, a sophisticated system that combined traditional force field generation with spiritual protection elements unique to Grey Knights' equipment. The hood's psychic amplifiers enhanced the wearer's mental abilities while providing shielding against psychic attacks that could penetrate conventional defenses. The system incorporated focusing crystals that had been grown in Titan's sanctified chambers, their resonance patterns attuned to the specific psychic frequency of the armor's intended wearer. The ritual preparation of Grey Knights' equipment before each deployment represented a crucial element in maintaining the spiritual effectiveness of their sacred armaments. These ceremonies took place in consecrated chambers within Titan's fortress monastery, where the chapter's chaplains and techmarines worked together to ensure that every weapon and piece of armor carried maximum blessing into combat. The rituals involved the application of sacred unguents that had been prepared using formulas dating back to the chapter's founding, their ingredients including blessed oils, powdered silver, and fragments of sanctified texts. The blessing ceremonies began with the ritual cleansing of each item, using sanctified water that had been collected from Titan's deepest chambers, where natural springs had been consecrated through continuous prayer for 10 millennia. The weapons and armor were then anointed with sacred oils, while chaplains recited protective litanies that reinforced the spiritual wards already incorporated into their construction. Each piece of equipment received individual attention, with the blessing rituals tailored to the specific mission parameters and expected demonic threats. The preparation process included the loading of ammunition with rounds that had been individually blessed and marked with protective runes appropriate to the anticipated enemy. Stormbolter magazines were filled with shells that carried specific blessings against the demon types most likely to be encountered, while Psycannon ammunition received enhanced spiritual charges that would maximize effectiveness against greater demons. The ritual loading of weapons took place in chambers where the air itself had been sanctified, preventing any possibility of contamination during the preparation process. The final stage of equipment preparation involved the activation of dormant psychic circuits within the weapons and armor, awakening their full potential through prayers that had been passed down from the original Grand Masters. These activation rituals created permanent links between the equipment and its intended user, establishing psychic resonance that would enhance combat effectiveness while providing additional protection against demonic corruption. The completed preparation left each Grey Knight equipped with armaments that carried the full blessing of the Emperor's divine will, transforming them into walking instruments of sacred vengeance against the forces of chaos. The organizational structure of the Grey Knights diverged fundamentally from the Codex Astartes patterns followed by most Space Marine chapters, reflecting their unique mission and the specialized nature of anti-demon warfare. Where standard chapters organized themselves into 10 companies of roughly 100 Marines each, the Grey Knights divided their forces into 8 distinct brotherhoods, each numbering approximately 100 warriors, but structured around specific tactical doctrines and spiritual specializations. This arrangement traced its origins to the 8 Grand Masters, who had founded the chapter during the Horus Heresy, with each brotherhood inheriting the particular expertise and combat philosophy of its founding leader. The decision to maintain 8 brotherhoods rather than adopt standard Imperial organization reflected practical considerations that had emerged during the chapter's early campaigns against demonic incursions. Different types of chaos entities required specialized approaches that went beyond conventional tactical flexibility, demanding warriors who had dedicated their entire existence to mastering specific aspects of anti-demon combat. Each brotherhood developed unique traditions, training regimens, and equipment loadouts that optimized their effectiveness against particular categories of demonic threat, creating a chapter-wide capability that could respond to any manifestation of chaos with appropriate specialized force. The First Brotherhood held the position of greatest honor within the chapter hierarchy, its warriors serving as the Supreme Grand Master's personal guard and the chapter's most elite strike force. This brotherhood maintained the strongest connection to the chapter's founding traditions, its members trained in combat techniques that had been personally developed by the First Grand Master during Titan's exile in the Warp. The First Brotherhood's warriors specialized in confronting the most powerful greater demons. Their training focused on the precise application of psychic power and close combat expertise necessary to engage demon princes and bloodthirsters in direct confrontation. The Brotherhood's composition reflected this elite status, with a higher proportion of Terminator armored veterans than any other formation within the chapter. These warriors had proven themselves through decades of combat against the most dangerous servants of chaos, their experience encompassing battles against entities whose very presence could drive mortal minds to madness. The First Brotherhood maintained exclusive access to the chapter's most sacred relics, including weapons and armor pieces that incorporated fragments recovered from the Emperor's own equipment during the defense of Terra. Training within the First Brotherhood emphasized individual excellence and spiritual purity that exceeded even the already extraordinary standards of the Grey Knights. Candidates for promotion into the Brotherhood underwent trials that tested their ability to resist corruption when exposed to the most potent forms of demonic influence, including controlled encounters with bound greater demons under carefully monitored conditions. These tests took place in the deepest chambers of Titan's Fortress Monastery, where ancient wards could contain even the most powerful entities while preventing them from permanently harming the candidates. The 2nd through 7th Brotherhoods each developed distinct tactical specializations that reflected the diverse nature of demonic threats faced by the Imperium. The 2nd Brotherhood focused on rapid deployment and surgical strikes against emerging chaos cults before they could complete major summoning rituals. Their warriors trained extensively in teleportation combat techniques, perfecting the ability to materialize directly into hostile territory and eliminate key targets before enemy forces could respond effectively. The Brotherhood maintained larger numbers of personal teleporters and specialized equipment designed for deep strike operations behind enemy lines. The 3rd Brotherhood specialized in prolonged campaigns against entrenched demonic forces. Their warriors trained in siege warfare techniques adapted for combat against entities that could manipulate reality itself. These Marines developed expertise in establishing and maintaining sanctified perimeters that could contain demonic incursions, while allowing Imperial forces to gradually reduce enemy positions through sustained pressure. The Brotherhood's equipment loadouts emphasized heavy weapons and defensive systems capable of operating effectively during extended engagements against numerically superior demonic forces. The Fourth Brotherhood focused on counter-summoning operations, their warriors trained to identify and disrupt the complex rituals that brought demons into real space. These specialists possessed extensive knowledge of demonic hierarchies and summoning procedures, allowing them to predict and counter enemy attempts to reinforce their positions through warp-based transportation. The Brotherhood maintained close relationships with Inquisition, Ordo Malleus forces, providing expertise that enhanced joint operations against major chaos incursions. The Fifth Brotherhood specialized in purification operations, their warriors trained to cleanse areas that had been corrupted by prolonged demonic presence. These Marines developed techniques for neutralizing chaos taint at the molecular level, using combinations of psychic power and sanctified equipment to restore corrupted environments to spiritual purity. The Brotherhood's operations often continued long after conventional military objectives had been achieved, ensuring that no trace of demonic influence remained to threaten future Imperial occupation. The Sixth Brotherhood focused on intelligence gathering and reconnaissance operations in demon-infested regions. Their warriors trained in stealth techniques that allowed them to operate undetected in areas where reality itself had become unreliable, gathering information about enemy dispositions and capabilities that proved crucial for planning larger operations. The Brotherhood developed specialized equipment designed to function effectively in environments where conventional sensors and communication systems failed due to warp interference. The Seventh Brotherhood specialized in training and indoctrination operations, their warriors responsible for preparing new recruits and maintaining the chapter's spiritual standards. These Marines possessed exceptional teaching abilities, combined with the psychic sensitivity necessary to identify potential corruption in their battle brothers before it could spread. The Brotherhood maintained Titans training facilities and oversaw the complex rituals that transformed candidates into full Grey Knights. The Eighth Brotherhood held a unique position within the chapter structure, serving as a reserve force that could reinforce other brotherhoods during major campaigns while maintaining responsibility for the defense of Titan itself. These warriors trained in all aspects of Grey Knight's combat doctrine, their versatility allowing them to integrate seamlessly with specialized formations when additional manpower was required. The Eighth Brotherhood also maintained the chapter's fleet assets and provided crews for the strike cruisers and battle barges that transported Grey Knight's forces across the galaxy. Within each brotherhood, the command hierarchy followed patterns that balanced military efficiency with the spiritual requirements of anti-demon warfare. Justicars served as squad leaders, their authority derived from both tactical expertise and proven spiritual purity that allowed them to maintain unit cohesion when facing entities that could drive lesser warriors to madness. These leaders underwent specialized training that emphasized psychological resilience and the ability to make rapid tactical decisions while under the influence of reality warping effects generated by greater demons. The selection process for Justicar rank required candidates to demonstrate not only superior combat skills, but also the spiritual strength necessary to resist demonic corruption while maintaining command authority over their subordinates. Potential Justicars faced trials that exposed them to concentrated chaos influence while requiring them to continue issuing coherent tactical orders and maintaining squad discipline. These tests took place in controlled environments where failure would not endanger other Grey Knights, but the psychological stress involved often eliminated candidates who had shown promise in conventional leadership roles. Justicars received additional psychic training that enhanced their ability to coordinate their squad's collective psychic potential during combat operations. This training included techniques for establishing psychic links with their subordinates that allowed for instantaneous communication and coordination, even when conventional methods failed due to demonic interference. The psychic bonds created between Justicars and their squads provided tactical advantages that went beyond simple communication, allowing for synchronized psychic attacks and defensive measures that maximize the unit's effectiveness against demonic opponents. Above the Justicars, Brotherhood champions served as the elite warriors responsible for maintaining their formation's combat traditions and spiritual purity. These individuals had proven themselves through decades of service that included victories against some of the most dangerous entities in the galaxy, their combat records encompassing successful engagements with demon princes, greater demons, and other threats that could destroy entire conventional military formations. Brotherhood champions carried weapons and equipment that represented the finest examples of Titan's artificers' work, their gear often incorporating relics that dated back to the chapter's founding. The role of Brotherhood champion extended beyond simple combat leadership to include responsibility for maintaining the spiritual health of their formation. These warriors possessed psychic abilities that allowed them to detect the earliest signs of corruption in their battle brothers, intervening before taint could spread throughout the Brotherhood. Champions conducted regular spiritual examinations of their subordinates, using techniques that could identify psychological vulnerabilities that demons might exploit during future engagements. Brotherhood champions also served as the keepers of their formation's combat traditions, preserving the tactical doctrines and specialized techniques that had been developed over millennia of anti-demon warfare. These individuals maintained detailed records of successful engagements that served as training materials for future generations. Their documentation, including precise descriptions of enemy capabilities and the countermeasures that had proven effective. The champion's knowledge encompassed not only conventional military tactics, but also the spiritual and psychic techniques necessary for combating entities that existed partially outside normal reality. Brotherhood captains commanded their formations with authority that combined military rank with spiritual leadership, their position requiring individuals who could inspire absolute loyalty while maintaining the psychological stability necessary to make crucial decisions under extreme stress. These leaders had typically served for centuries before achieving their rank, their experience encompassing campaigns against every major type of demonic threat faced by the Imperium. Brotherhood captains possessed tactical expertise that allowed them to coordinate complex multi-unit operations while adapting to the reality warping effects that characterized major demonic incursions. The selection of Brotherhood captains involved extensive evaluation by the chapter's senior leadership, including direct psychic examination by the Supreme Grand Master himself. Candidates underwent trials that tested their ability to maintain command authority while exposed to the most potent forms of demonic influence, including simulated encounters with entities whose presence could drive experienced warriors to madness. These tests required potential captains to continue issuing coherent tactical orders, while their perceptions of reality were systematically distorted by controlled psychic effects. Brotherhood captains received access to the chapter's most classified tactical doctrines and strategic intelligence, their security clearance encompassing knowledge of demonic capabilities that remained hidden from lower-ranking Grey Knights. This information included detailed analyses of greater demon behavior patterns, summoning ritual procedures, and the political structures that governed chaos forces across different regions of the galaxy. The captains used this intelligence to develop operational plans that could counter enemy strategies before they reached fruition. At the apex of the chapter hierarchy stood the Supreme Grand Master, an individual whose authority encompassed not only military command, but also spiritual leadership of the entire Grey Knights organization. This position required someone who had demonstrated absolute incorruptibility through centuries of exposure to the most dangerous entities in the galaxy, their psychological resilience tested through direct confrontation with demon princes and other beings whose very existence challenged the fundamental nature of reality. The Supreme Grand Master served as the chapter's primary link to the Emperor's divine will, their psychic abilities allowing them to receive guidance directly from Terra's psychic beacon. The Supreme Grand Master's selection involved a process that remained classified at the highest levels of Imperial security, though it was known to include direct intervention by the Emperor's psychic presence through methods that transcended normal communication. The chosen individual underwent final trials that tested their ability to channel divine power without corruption. Their consciousness temporarily merged with aspects of the Emperor's own awareness to verify their absolute spiritual purity. These final tests took place in the most sacred chambers of Titan's Fortress Monastery, where ancient wards could contain the psychic energies involved while preventing unauthorized observation. Paladins represented the most elite warriors within each brotherhood, veterans whose combat experience and spiritual purity elevated them above their already extraordinary battle brothers. These individuals had survived encounters with the most dangerous servants of chaos while maintaining perfect psychological stability and unwavering loyalty to the Emperor's cause. Paladins served multiple roles within their brotherhoods, functioning as elite assault troops during major engagements, while also serving as spiritual counselors and trainers for less experienced Grey Knights. The path to Paladin rank required candidates to demonstrate exceptional performance across all aspects of Grey Knight's service, including combat effectiveness, spiritual purity, and leadership capability. Potential Paladins underwent extensive evaluation that included direct psychic examination by Brotherhood captains and champions, their minds scrutinized for any trace of corruption or psychological weakness that could compromise their effectiveness. The selection process often took decades to complete, as candidates needed to prove their worthiness through sustained excellence rather than single exceptional performances. Paladins received additional training in advanced psychic techniques that enhanced their combat effectiveness while providing them with abilities necessary for their teaching and counseling responsibilities. This training included methods for detecting and countering demonic influence in their battle brothers, allowing them to serve as an additional layer of protection against corruption within their brotherhoods. Paladins also learned specialized combat techniques that had been developed specifically for engaging the most powerful demonic entities, their skills encompassing both individual combat prowess and the coordination of squad-level psychic attacks. The equipment issued to Paladins reflected their elite status within the chapter hierarchy, with each warrior receiving personally crafted weapons and armor that incorporated the finest materials and most advanced protective systems available to the Grey Knights. Paladin armor included additional psychic amplification systems that enhanced the wearer's abilities while providing superior protection against both physical and spiritual attacks. Their weapons often incorporated relics or blessed components that increased their effectiveness against specific types of demonic entity, creating arsenals that were perfectly tailored to each paladin's combat specialization. Purifier squads occupied a specialized niche within the Grey Knights organization, their warriors dedicated to the complete elimination of chaos corruption through the application of cleansing flame that burned with the Emperor's own divine essence. These specialists possessed psychic abilities that allowed them to generate sacred fire capable of purging demonic taint from infected individuals, corrupted environments, and tainted equipment. The purifier's flames carried properties that went beyond simple incineration, their spiritual energy capable of destroying corruption at the molecular level while leaving pure materials unharmed. The selection of purifiers required candidates who possessed exceptional psychic sensitivity combined with the spiritual strength necessary to channel cleansing energies without being overwhelmed by the corruption they encountered. Potential purifiers underwent trials that exposed them to various forms of chaos taint, while requiring them to maintain perfect control over their cleansing abilities, their performance evaluated based on their capacity to eliminate corruption without causing unnecessary destruction to surrounding areas. The training process often eliminated candidates who possessed the necessary psychic power but lacked the precise control required for surgical purification operations. Purifier training emphasized the development of psychic techniques that could adapt to different types of corruption, their abilities encompassing methods for cleansing everything from individual demon-possessed individuals to entire planetary populations that had been exposed to chaos influence. These specialists learned to modulate their cleansing flames to match the specific nature of the corruption they encountered, their flames burning hotter against more potent forms of taint, while remaining gentle enough to purify infected individuals without causing permanent harm. The most experienced purifiers could generate cleansing energies that selectively targeted corruption while leaving healthy tissue completely unaffected. The equipment used by purifier squads included specialized weapons designed to channel and focus their cleansing abilities, creating tools that could deliver purifying energy with surgical precision or devastating area effects as circumstances required. Purifier armor incorporated additional psychic focusing systems that enhanced the wearer's ability to generate and control cleansing flames, their suits serving as amplification systems that increased both the power and precision of their abilities. The squads also carried specialized detection equipment that could identify different types of corruption, allowing them to select appropriate purification techniques for specific threats. The transformation of Titan into the Grey Knight's fortress monastery began during the final stages of the Horus Heresy, when Malcador the Sigillite enacted his desperate gambit to preserve the Emperor's secret warriors from the corruption that threatened to consume the galaxy. Saturn's largest moon had served as an Imperial research facility and monitoring station before its selection as the chapter's sanctuary, its existing infrastructure providing the foundation for modifications that would render it capable of existing within the warp itself. The conversion process required technologies that pushed the boundaries of Imperial engineering capabilities, combining archaeotech systems recovered from the dark age of technology with psychic enhancement techniques that the Emperor had developed specifically for this purpose. The fortress monastery's construction incorporated defensive systems that operated on multiple dimensional planes simultaneously, creating a stronghold that could resist attack from both real space and the immaterial realm of the warp. Massive psychic resonators were built into Titan's core, their crystalline matrices generating fields of sanctified energy that permeated every chamber and corridor within the moon's structure. These resonators drew their power from geothermal vents that had been consecrated through rituals lasting months, their natural energy transformed into spiritual force that actively repelled demonic influence while strengthening the faith and resolve of the Grey Knights who dwelled within. The moon's surface underwent complete reconstruction during the transformation process, its icy plains replaced with armored bastions and defensive installations that could withstand bombardment from demon engines and reality-warping weapons. Towering spires rose from the fortress monastery's exterior, their surfaces inscribed with protective wards that created overlapping fields of spiritual protection extending far into the surrounding void. These spires served as both defensive installations and psychic amplifiers, their crystalline cores channeling the collective psychic potential of the Grey Knights to create barriers that could repel even greater demon assaults. The fortress monastery's internal structure defied conventional architectural principles, its chambers and corridors arranged according to sacred geometries that disrupted chaos energy while facilitating the flow of blessed power throughout the complex. The passages between major sections incorporated psychic dampening fields that prevented unauthorized access while screening all who passed through for signs of corruption. These security measures operated automatically through machine spirits that had been specially conditioned to recognize demonic influence, their programming incorporating protective protocols that could seal compromised areas and alert the chapter's leadership to potential threats. When Malcador transported Titan into the warp during the Siege of Terra, the fortress monastery existed in a state of temporal flux that allowed accelerated construction and preparation, while remaining protected from the chaotic energies that surrounded it. The moon occupied a stable pocket of reality within the Sea of Souls, its position maintained through psychic anchors that drew their power from the Emperor's own divine essence. This sanctuary existed outside normal space-time, allowing the Grey Knights to complete their training and preparation while the galaxy burned with heretical fire around them. The Sanctum Sanctorum occupied the deepest levels of the fortress monastery, its chambers carved from Titan's bedrock and protected by wards that had been personally inscribed by the Emperor before the chapter's founding. These sacred halls contained relics whose power rivaled the most holy artifacts in the Imperium's possession, their presence creating fields of sanctified energy that could purge corruption from anyone who entered with pure intent. The sanctum's entrance required passage through a series of psychic barriers that tested the spiritual purity of all who sought access, their defenses capable of detecting even the slightest trace of chaos taint. Within the sanctum's innermost chamber rested the Liber Daemonica, a tome containing the true names and binding rituals for every demon that had ever manifested in real space. This book had been compiled through 10 millennia of Grey Knight's operations, its pages inscribed with silver ink that had been blessed through rituals performed by the chapter's most powerful librarians. The tome's knowledge was so dangerous that only the Supreme Grand Master and his most trusted advisors were permitted to study its contents directly, their minds protected by psychic shields that prevented the information from corrupting their souls. The sanctum also housed fragments of the Emperor's own armor and weapons, recovered from the Imperial Palace during the reconstruction that followed the Horus Heresy. These relics radiated divine power that could be felt throughout the fortress monastery, their presence serving as a constant reminder of the Grey Knight's sacred mission, while providing spiritual strength to all who served within Titan's halls. The armor fragments were displayed within crystalline cases that had been grown using techniques developed specifically for containing artifacts of such immense power, their surfaces inscribed with protective runes that prevented unauthorized access, while allowing the relic's beneficial influence to permeate the surrounding chambers. Additional chambers within the sanctum contained weapons and equipment that had been blessed by the Emperor personally, including force weapons that carried fragments of his own psychic essence and armor pieces that provided protection against the most potent forms of demonic attack. These artifacts were reserved for use during the most critical missions, their power capable of turning the tide of battles against greater demons and demon princes. The selection of warriors worthy to bear such relics required approval from the Supreme Grand Master himself, their spiritual purity verified through extensive testing before they were permitted to wield weapons of such sacred significance. The fortress monastery's training facilities occupied vast chambers that had been designed to simulate every conceivable combat environment that Grey Knights might encounter during their service. These halls incorporated hololithic projectors that could create realistic representations of demon-infested worlds, their imagery so detailed that trainees could experience the psychological effects of fighting in corrupted environments without risking actual exposure to chaos taint. The training chambers also featured adjustable gravity systems and atmospheric processors that could replicate the conditions found on worlds where reality itself had been warped by prolonged demonic presence. Combat training areas included specialized chambers where Grey Knights could practice fighting against captured lesser demons under carefully controlled conditions. These entities were bound within psychic containment fields that prevented them from causing permanent harm, while allowing trainees to experience the reality warping effects and psychological pressure of facing actual chaos creatures. The bound demons were rotated regularly to prevent them from adapting to the training regimens, their imprisonment maintained through wards that required constant renewal by the chapter's librarians. The training facilities also incorporated meditation chambers where Grey Knights could practice the mental disciplines necessary for maintaining spiritual purity during extended campaigns against chaos forces. These chambers were carved from single pieces of blessed stone and inscribed with protective mantras that created environments of perfect psychic stillness. The meditation halls allowed warriors to commune directly with the Emperor's divine presence, their consciousness temporarily merged with aspects of his awareness to receive guidance and spiritual strengthening. Advanced training areas included chambers where Grey Knights could practice coordinating their collective psychic abilities, their sessions monitored by experienced librarians who provided guidance on maximizing the effectiveness of Brotherhood-wide channeling techniques. These training exercises often involved complex scenarios that required precise coordination between multiple squads, their success depended on the warriors' ability to synchronize their psychic potential while maintaining individual combat effectiveness. The Fortress Monastery's libraries contain the most comprehensive collection of anti-demon lore in the Imperium, their archives encompassing knowledge that had been gathered over 10 millennia of warfare against chaos forces. These vast halls housed texts that detailed the hierarchies and capabilities of every known demon type, their information compiled through direct observation during countless battles and interrogations of captured cultists. The library's collections included detailed tactical analyses of successful Grey Knights operations, their documentation providing future generations with proven strategies for combating specific types of demonic threat. The most dangerous texts within the libraries were stored in specially warded chambers that could only be accessed by senior Grey Knights whose spiritual purity had been verified through extensive testing. These forbidden tomes contained knowledge that could corrupt lesser minds through simple exposure, their pages inscribed with information about demonic summoning rituals, true names of greater demons, and the political structures that governed chaos forces across different regions of the galaxy. The storage chambers incorporated psychic dampening fields that prevented the dangerous knowledge from influencing unauthorized readers while allowing qualified scholars to study the information safely. Scribes within the libraries worked continuously to update and expand the archives, their efforts encompassing the translation of captured chaos texts and the compilation of after-action reports from recent Grey Knights operations. These scholars underwent extensive psychic conditioning that allowed them to process dangerous information without risking corruption, their minds protected by mental barriers that prevented forbidden knowledge from taking root in their consciousness. The scribes' work was supervised by librarians who could detect the earliest signs of taint and intervene before corruption could spread. The libraries also maintained extensive collections of Imperial historical records that had been preserved from the pre-heresy era, their archives containing information about the Emperor's early campaigns and the development of technologies that remained classified at the highest levels of Imperial security. These historical documents provided context for understanding the origins of chaos corruption and the strategic considerations that had influenced the Emperor's decision to create the Grey Knights as his ultimate weapon against demonic forces. The chapter's fleet assets were housed within massive docking bays that had been carved from Titan's interior structure, their chambers large enough to accommodate the strike cruisers and battle barges that transported Grey Knights' forces across the galaxy. These vessels incorporated defensive systems that went far beyond the already formidable protection provided by standard Imperial Navy warships, their hulls inscribed with protective wards that could resist both conventional weapons and reality warping attacks employed by Chaos fleets. The Grey Knights' ships featured specialized warp drives that had been modified to navigate through regions of space where demonic activity had destabilized local reality, their navigation systems incorporating psychic guidance elements that could maintain course even when conventional instruments failed due to warp interference. The vessel's machine spirits had been conditioned to resist demonic corruption, their programming including protective protocols that could detect and counter attempts at technological subversion by chaos forces. Each ship's crew compartments included sanctified areas where mortal personnel could seek refuge if the vessel encountered entities capable of corrupting unprotected minds through proximity alone. These chambers were warded against psychic intrusion and stocked with supplies that could sustain their occupants during extended periods of isolation. The crew quarters also featured purification systems that could cleanse air and water of demonic taint, ensuring that essential personnel remained healthy and uncorrupted during operations in heavily contaminated regions. The fleet's weapon systems incorporated blessed ammunition and psychically enhanced targeting, arrays that made them devastatingly effective against demon engines and other supernatural threats that conventional Imperial Navy vessels struggled to engage. The ships carried specialized ordnance designed specifically for orbital bombardment of demon-infested worlds, their warheads containing sanctified materials that could purge chaos corruption from planetary surfaces while minimizing collateral damage to Imperial infrastructure and personnel. Strike cruisers within the Grey Knight's fleet featured enhanced teleportation systems that could deploy full squads of Terminators directly into combat zones with unprecedented precision and safety. These teleportariums incorporated psychic guidance systems that could lock onto the spiritual signatures of Grey Knight's forces, allowing for rapid reinforcement and extraction operations even in environments where conventional transportation methods would prove impossible due to demonic interference. The fortress monastery's command and control facilities occupied strategically positioned chambers that provided comprehensive oversight of Grey Knight's operations across the galaxy. These centers incorporated communication systems that could maintain contact with deployed forces through psychic relay networks that bypassed the unreliable nature of conventional astropathic communication in demon-contested regions. The command facilities featured hololithic displays that could present real-time tactical information from multiple theaters simultaneously, their projections enhanced with psychic overlays that revealed demonic activity patterns invisible to conventional sensors. Intelligence analysis chambers within the command complex housed teams of specialists who monitored demonic activity across the Imperium, their work encompassing the identification of emerging chaos cults and the prediction of major incursion attempts before they could reach dangerous levels. These analysts worked with data streams from Inquisition sources and Grey Knight's reconnaissance forces, their assessments providing the strategic intelligence necessary for positioning chapter assets where they would prove most effective against developing threats. The Grey Knight's approach to warfare against demonic entities required tactical doctrines that transcended conventional military thinking, as their enemies possessed capabilities that rendered standard Imperial Guard or even Space Marine tactics inadequate. Demons could manipulate reality itself, phase between dimensions at will, and corrupt their opponents through proximity alone, necessitating combat methods that accounted for threats that existed beyond the physical realm. The chapter's tactical philosophy centered on the principle that every engagement with chaos forces was fundamentally a spiritual battle disguised as conventional warfare, requiring warriors who could maintain absolute faith while adapting to enemies whose very existence defied natural law. When confronting greater demons, the Grey Knights employed specialized assault patterns that had been developed through millennia of bitter experience against entities whose power could reshape entire battlefields. These ancient beings possessed strength that could crush land raiders with their bare claws, psychic abilities that could drive entire armies insane through proximity alone, and reality warping capabilities that made conventional tactical planning nearly impossible. The chapter's response involved coordinated strikes that targeted not just the demon's physical form, but its spiritual anchors to real space, requiring precise timing and flawless execution from every participating warrior. The initial phase of greater demon engagement focused on establishing psychic superiority through the combined efforts of multiple Grey Knight squads working in perfect coordination. Brotherhood formations would position themselves at calculated distances around the target, their collective psychic potential creating overlapping fields of sanctified energy that constrain the demon's reality warping abilities. This psychic containment prevented the entity from simply teleporting away or summoning reinforcements, while gradually weakening its connection to the material plane through sustained spiritual pressure. Terminator squads equipped with psy-cannons provided suppressing fire that served dual purposes during these engagements. The blessed ammunition disrupted the demon's ability to maintain coherent physical form, while the psychic enhancement of each shot created cumulative spiritual damage that weakened the entity's presence in real space. The heavy weapons teams coordinated their fire patterns to create corridors of sanctified energy that herded the greater demon into predetermined kill zones where close combat specialists could engage with maximum effectiveness. The actual assault phase required Grey Knights to close with their target, despite the tremendous dangers posed by proximity to such powerful entities. greater demons radiated auras of corruption and terror that could paralyze even veteran space marines, their presence warping local reality in ways that made conventional movement and targeting extremely difficult. Grey Knights overcame these challenges through specialized movement techniques that incorporated psychic shielding, allowing them to advance through environments where the laws of physics had become unreliable while maintaining combat effectiveness. Paladin squads typically spearheaded these close combat assaults, their enhanced armor and weapons providing the protection and firepower necessary to survive direct engagement with entities that could destroy conventional forces through casual contact. The Paladins' Nemesis Force weapons proved essential during these encounters, their blessed blades capable of inflicting wounds that would heal normally on mortal flesh, but remained permanently damaging to demonic entities. The weapons' psychic enhancement allowed them to disrupt the reality anchors that kept greater demons manifested in the physical realm, gradually weakening their connection until banishment became possible. Combat against demon princes required modifications to standard greater demon engagement protocols, as these entities retain the tactical intelligence and strategic thinking of their former mortal existence, while possessing the reality-warping capabilities of true demons. Demon princes could anticipate and counter conventional assault patterns, forcing Grey Knights to employ more sophisticated tactical approaches that accounted for opponents who understood Imperial military doctrine from their previous service. These engagements often devolved into complex battles of maneuver, where both sides attempted to outflank and outthink their opponents while dealing with the constant threat of reality-warping attacks. The Grey Knights developed specialized techniques for combating demon princes that emphasized psychological warfare alongside conventional tactics. These former Space Marine captains and chapter masters retained fragments of their original personalities despite their corruption, creating psychological vulnerabilities that skilled Grey Knights could exploit through carefully targeted taunts and challenges that played upon the demon prince's residual pride and tactical ego. Brotherhood champions often served as focal points for these psychological attacks, their challenges forcing demon princes into direct confrontation rather than allowing them to employ hit-and-run tactics that maximize their supernatural advantages. Possessed mortals presented entirely different tactical challenges that required the Grey Knights to balance their mission of demon destruction with the potential salvation of innocent souls. These unfortunate individuals had been invaded by demonic entities that controlled their bodies while feeding on their spiritual essence, creating hybrid opponents that combined human tactical flexibility with supernatural strength and resilience. The chapter's approach to possessed targets emphasized precision and restraint, using specialized techniques designed to exorcise the controlling demon without necessarily killing the host body. Purifier squads played crucial roles in operations against possessed mortals, their cleansing flames capable of burning away demonic influence while leaving the host's soul intact. The Purifier's psychic abilities allowed them to distinguish between the demon's spiritual signature and the victim's original essence, targeting their cleansing energies with surgical precision that could separate possessing entities from their hosts. This process required exceptional skill and concentration, as miscalculated applications of purifying power could destroy both demon and victim simultaneously. The exorcism process during active combat involved coordinated efforts between purifiers and standard Grey Knight squads, with conventional forces restraining the possessed individual while specialists performed the spiritual cleansing. These operations took place under extremely dangerous conditions, as possessing demons would attempt to kill their hosts rather than face banishment, forcing Grey Knights to complete their exorcisms while under direct attack from entities that possessed no concern for their own survival. Large-scale demon incursions required the Grey Knights to coordinate their efforts with other Imperial forces while maintaining operational security that prevented their allies from learning classified information about the chapter's capabilities and methods. These joint operations typically involved Astra Militarum regiments providing conventional military support, while Grey Knights' forces focused on eliminating the supernatural elements that conventional weapons could not effectively engage. The coordination required careful planning that maximized the effectiveness of both force types, while minimizing the risk of Imperial Guard units being exposed to corruption through proximity to powerful demonic entities. The Grey Knights' mastery of teleportation strikes provided them with tactical advantages that proved decisive during major demon incursions. Unlike conventional deep strike assaults that relied on drop pods or jump packs, Grey Knights could materialize directly into combat zones through psychically guided teleportation that bypassed conventional defenses entirely. This capability allowed them to appear behind enemy lines, strike at critical targets, and extract before opposing forces could mount effective counterattacks. Teleportation assault tactics required precise coordination between multiple squads operating simultaneously across different areas of the battlefield. Strike forces would materialize at predetermined coordinates that had been selected through careful analysis of enemy dispositions and terrain features, their arrival timed to maximize tactical surprise while ensuring mutual support between different elements. The teleportation process itself was guided by librarians whose psychic abilities allowed them to navigate through warp space while avoiding the dangers that made conventional teleportation unreliable in demon-contested regions. The initial moments following teleportation strikes proved critical to mission success, as Grey Knights' forces needed to establish tactical positions and begin engaging priority targets before enemy forces could adapt to their presence. Terminator squads equipped with heavy weapons provided immediate fire support that suppressed demon forces, while assault elements advanced to close combat range, where their specialized weapons and training proved most effective. The coordinated nature of these strikes often allowed relatively small Grey Knights forces to eliminate key enemy assets before withdrawing through additional teleportation jumps. Deep strike operations against demon strongholds required extensive preparation that included detailed intelligence gathering about target locations and enemy force dispositions. Grey Knights reconnaissance specialists would infiltrate demon-controlled areas weeks or months before planned assaults, their observations providing the tactical intelligence necessary for planning effective strikes against heavily defended positions. These advanced teams operated under extreme danger, as prolonged exposure to demonic corruption could overwhelm even Grey Knights if proper precautions were not maintained. The integration of Ordo Malleus support into Grey Knights' operations created force multipliers that enhanced the chapter's effectiveness while providing Inquisition forces with military capabilities they could not achieve independently. Inquisitors brought political authority that could requisition Imperial Navy support, Astra Militarum reinforcements, and specialized equipment that supplemented the Grey Knights' already formidable arsenal. The Inquisition's intelligence networks also provided early warning of developing demon threats, allowing Grey Knights' forces to respond to incursions before they could reach dangerous levels. Ordo Malleus Inquisitors typically accompanied Grey Knights' forces as embedded advisors, whose knowledge of local conditions and enemy capabilities proved invaluable during complex operations. These individuals possessed extensive experience with chaos, corruption, and demon behavior patterns, their expertise complementing the Grey Knights' military prowess with strategic intelligence about enemy motivations and likely tactical responses. The Inquisitor's authority also proved essential when operations required coordination with planetary governors or other Imperial officials who might otherwise refuse to cooperate with unidentified Space Marine forces. The political cover provided by Inquisition involvement allowed Grey Knights to operate openly in situations where their normal secrecy requirements would have prevented effective action. Inquisitors could issue cover stories that explained the presence of specialized Space Marine forces without revealing classified information about the chapter's true nature and capabilities. This political protection proved particularly valuable during operations on heavily populated Imperial worlds, where large-scale military action required explanation to local authorities and civilian populations. Joint operations between Grey Knights and Ordo Malleus forces required careful coordination to maximize the effectiveness of both organizations, while maintaining operational security about the chapter's classified capabilities. Inquisitors needed sufficient information about Grey Knight's methods to plan effective operations without gaining access to knowledge that could compromise the chapter's security if the Inquisitor was later captured or corrupted. This balance required extensive briefings and coordination meetings that took place under carefully controlled conditions within secure facilities. The ritual preparations that preceded Grey Knight's combat operations represented essential elements of their tactical doctrine, as the spiritual conditioning required for effective demon combat could not be maintained through training alone. These ceremonies took place in sanctified chambers within strike cruisers or temporary field shrines established by chaplains, their purpose encompassing both practical weapon preparation and the psychological conditioning necessary for facing entities whose very existence challenged the fundamental nature of reality. Litanies of purity formed the foundation of pre-battle spiritual preparation, their recitation serving to reinforce the mental barriers that protected Grey Knights from corruption, while focusing their psychic abilities for maximum combat effectiveness. These prayers had been composed by the original Grand Masters during the chapter's founding, their words carrying power that resonated with the Emperor's own psychic essence to create protective fields around participating warriors. The litanies were recited in perfect unison by entire brotherhoods, their collective voices creating harmonics that strengthened the spiritual bonds between battle brothers while preparing their minds for the psychological stresses of demon combat. The blessing of weapons and armor represented crucial elements of pre-combat preparation that enhanced the spiritual effectiveness of Grey Knight's equipment, while ensuring that every piece of gear carried maximum protection against demonic corruption. Chaplains would anoint each weapon with sanctified oils, while reciting prayers specific to the type of enemy the force expected to encounter, their blessings tailored to exploit particular vulnerabilities in different demon types. The oils themselves contained blessed silver particles and fragments of sacred texts that had been ground into powder, their application creating molecular-level wards that enhanced the weapon's effectiveness against supernatural targets. Armor blessing ceremonies involved the application of protective unguents to joint seals and vulnerable points where demonic corruption might attempt to penetrate the suit's defenses. These preparations included the activation of dormant psychic circuits within the armor systems, awakening protective functions that would automatically engage if the wearer was exposed to reality warping effects or direct psychic attack. The blessing process also included the recalibration of the armor's machine's spirit to recognize and resist demonic influence, its programming updated with protective protocols specific to the anticipated threat types. The final phase of ritual preparation involved collective meditation that synchronized the psychic potential of participating Grey Knights while reinforcing their spiritual unity as a brotherhood dedicated to the Emperor's service. These meditation sessions took place in chambers where the air itself had been sanctified through continuous prayer, their environment creating conditions that facilitated direct communion with the Emperor's divine presence. The collective focus achieved during these sessions created psychic bonds between participating warriors that would enhance their combat coordination, while providing additional protection against attempts to corrupt or control individual Grey Knights during battle. Combat doctrine against specific demon types required specialized approaches that accounted for the unique capabilities and vulnerabilities of different chaos entities. Bloodthirsters demanded tactics that emphasized ranged combat and coordinated psychic attacks, as these massive entities possessed close combat capabilities that could overwhelm even Terminator-armored Grey Knights through sheer physical power. The chapter's response involved sustained psy-cannon fire that weakened the Bloodthirsters' reality anchors, while librarians channeled collective psychic attacks that disrupted its connection to the warp. Great Unclean Ones required entirely different tactical approaches that emphasized mobility and precision strikes against specific vulnerable points on their massive, diseased forms. These entities radiated corruption auras that could infect Grey Knights through proximity alone, forcing assault teams to maintain careful distances while identifying opportunities for surgical strikes against the demon's vital organs. Purifier squads proved particularly effective against great unclean ones, their cleansing flames capable of burning away the diseased flesh that sustained these entities while neutralizing the toxic clouds they generated as defensive mechanisms. Lords of Change presented perhaps the greatest tactical challenges due to their reality warping capabilities and precognitive abilities that allowed them to anticipate and counter conventional assault patterns. Combat against these entities required constant tactical adaptation and the use of psychic null zones that disrupted their ability to perceive future events accurately. Grey Knight's forces would employ feint attacks and diversionary maneuvers that forced the Lord of Change to commit to specific defensive responses, creating openings that could be exploited through rapid redeployment and concentrated firepower. The coordination required for successful demon hunting operations extended beyond simple tactical cooperation to encompass spiritual synchronization that allowed Grey Knights to function as extensions of a single divine will. This unity of purpose proved essential when facing entities that could exploit even momentary hesitation or doubt to corrupt or destroy their opponents. The chapter's training emphasized the development of intuitive combat coordination that operated below the level of conscious thought, creating responses that were too rapid for demons to predict or counter through conventional means. The absolute secrecy that shrouds Grey Knight's operations extends far beyond conventional military classification, representing a level of information control that renders the chapter effectively invisible to the vast majority of Imperial citizens and even high-ranking military officials. This veil of silence operates through mechanisms that systematically eliminate all traces of Grey Knight's involvement in military operations, creating gaps in historical records that appear as natural omissions rather than deliberate censorship. The secrecy serves multiple purposes beyond simple operational security, protecting both the chapter's tactical advantages and the psychological stability of Imperial populations, who would struggle to comprehend the true nature of the demonic threats that the Grey Knights face daily. The implementation of this information blackout requires coordination across multiple Imperial organizations, each playing specific roles in maintaining the fiction that the Grey Knights do not exist. Administratum scribes receive memory-locked protocols that prevent them from retaining knowledge of requisitions and supply requests related to Grey Knight's operations, their consciousness automatically editing out any references to the chapter during routine data processing. These mental barriers operate at subconscious levels, creating blind spots in bureaucratic awareness that allow massive military operations to proceed without generating paper trails that could compromise operational security. Imperial Navy personnel who transport Grey Knight's forces undergo similar mental conditioning that prevents them from forming coherent memories of their passengers or destinations. Ship crews remember routine transport duties involving unspecified Space Marine forces, their recollections deliberately vague about unit markings, equipment specifications, or operational parameters. The conditioning process involves subtle psychic manipulation performed by sanctioned psychers, whose own memories are subsequently wiped to prevent the formation of security breaches through accumulated knowledge. The most dramatic manifestation of Grey Knight's secrecy occurs through the systematic memory cleansing of entire Imperial Guard regiments that witness chapter operations during joint military campaigns. These procedures represent some of the most ethically complex aspects of Imperial military policy, as they involve the deliberate alteration of loyal soldiers' memories to preserve state secrets that transcend individual rights or personal autonomy. The process typically begins within hours of mission completion, before traumatic memories can solidify into permanent recollections that would prove more difficult to modify or eliminate. Sanctioned psychers attached to Ordo Malleus forces perform the actual memory modification procedures using techniques that selectively target specific recollections while leaving the subject's core personalities and military training intact. The psychers work through entire regiments systematically, their mental probes identifying and isolating memories related to Grey Knight's presence, demonic encounters, or other classified information that could compromise Imperial security. The process requires exceptional skill, as crude memory deletion could leave subjects with obvious gaps in their recollections that might prompt investigation or create psychological instability. The replacement memories implanted during these procedures are carefully crafted to provide plausible explanations for the subject's presence and actions during the classified operations. Imperial Guard veterans who fought alongside Grey Knights against demon incursions remember conventional battles against well-equipped heretical forces, their recollections modified to substitute human enemies for the supernatural threats they actually faced. The false memories include appropriate details about enemy equipment, tactics, and casualties that would satisfy routine after-action debriefings without revealing the true nature of the threats encountered. Medical personnel who treat Grey Knights casualties or provide support during joint operations receive specialized conditioning that prevents them from retaining detailed knowledge of chapter equipment, physiology, or capabilities. These individuals remember treating unspecified Space Marine casualties with conventional injuries, their medical records automatically edited to remove references to psychic wounds, demon-inflicted damage, or the specialized equipment used by Grey Knights forces. The conditioning extends to their professional notes and personal recollections, creating comprehensive information barriers that prevent accidental security breaches through casual conversation or official reporting. The psychological impact of memory modification on affected Imperial Guard personnel varies significantly based on individual mental resilience and the extent of alterations required. Some soldiers experience minor disorientation or vague feelings that their recollections are incomplete, but these symptoms typically fade within weeks as their minds adapt to the modified memory patterns. More extensive modifications can cause persistent headaches, sleep disturbances, or difficulty concentrating, though these effects are usually attributed to combat stress rather than psychic manipulation. In extreme cases where soldiers have been exposed to particularly traumatic demonic encounters, complete memory replacement becomes necessary to prevent permanent psychological damage. These individuals receive entirely fabricated recollections of their service period, their minds restructured around false experiences that provide psychological stability while eliminating all traces of their actual exposure to chaos corruption. The process effectively creates new personalities overlaid on existing individuals, though the subjects remain functionally identical to their original selves in terms of skills, loyalties, and basic character traits. The Ordo Malleus maintains specialized facilities where memory modification procedures are performed under controlled conditions that maximize success rates while minimizing risks to the subjects. These installations feature psychically shielded chambers where sanctioned psychers can work without interference from external mental influences, their operations monitored by medical personnel trained to recognize signs of psychic trauma or excessive mental stress. The facilities also maintain extensive databases of pre-fabricated memory templates that can be quickly adapted for different operational scenarios, reducing the time required for each procedure while ensuring consistency across multiple subjects. The relationship between the Grey Knights and the broader Inquisition represents one of the most complex political arrangements within the Imperial hierarchy, balancing the chapter's operational independence with their formal designation as the Chamber Militant of the Ordo Malleus. This relationship evolved gradually over the millennia following the Horus Heresy, as the Inquisition's founding fathers gradually became aware of the Grey Knight's existence through carefully managed revelations that preserved the chapter's essential secrecy while establishing necessary operational frameworks. The initial contact between the Grey Knights and the nascent Inquisition occurred during the early centuries of the 31st millennium, when Titan emerged from its warp exile to find the galaxy fundamentally transformed by the heresy's aftermath. The Inquisition's founders, many of whom had served directly under Malcador the Sigillite, possessed sufficient security clearance and spiritual authority to be trusted with knowledge of the chapter's existence. These early inquisitors underwent extensive psychic screening to verify their incorruptibility before being granted access to Grey Knight's operational intelligence and command structures. The formal establishment of the Grey Knights as the Ordo Malleus Chamber Militant required careful negotiation between the chapter's leadership and senior inquisitors who understood the necessity of maintaining absolute secrecy while creating functional command relationships. The resulting agreements granted Ordo Malleus inquisitors limited authority to request Grey Knight's support for major operations while preserving the chapter's autonomy in matters of recruitment, training, and internal organization. These arrangements recognized that the Grey Knight's specialized mission requirements made them unsuitable for conventional military subordination to Inquisition authority. Operational protocols established during these negotiations created dual command structures that allowed Grey Knights and Ordo Malleus forces to coordinate effectively while maintaining appropriate security barriers. Inquisitors gained access to carefully sanitized intelligence about Grey Knight's capabilities and deployment schedules, their knowledge sufficient for planning joint operations, without compromising classified information about the chapter's true nature or origins. The protocols also established procedures for requesting Grey Knight's support that prevented unauthorized personnel from learning about the chapter's existence through routine communication intercepts. The political implications of Grey Knight's secrecy extend throughout the Imperial hierarchy, creating tensions with organizations that require accurate intelligence about military capabilities and force dispositions to perform their essential functions. The Adeptus Mechanicus struggles with equipment requisitions and maintenance schedules for Grey Knight's gear, their tech priests receiving memory-locked specifications that prevent them from understanding the full capabilities of the devices they manufacture. These limitations occasionally result in supply shortages or maintenance delays that could compromise operational effectiveness if not carefully managed through alternative channels. The Imperial Navy faces similar challenges when providing transportation and fire support for Grey Knight's operations, as their officers cannot access complete mission briefings or tactical intelligence that might affect fleet deployment decisions. Naval commanders receive sanitized operational orders that provide sufficient information for effective support while concealing the true nature of the forces they are assisting. This compartmentalization occasionally leads to suboptimal tactical coordination, though the benefits of maintaining secrecy generally outweigh the operational costs of incomplete information sharing. Conflicts with other Space Marine chapters represent some of the most delicate political situations arising from Grey Knight's secrecy, as veteran chapter masters and senior officers possess sufficient experience to recognize gaps in official records and inconsistencies in operational reporting. These conflicts typically emerge during joint operations where multiple chapters are deployed against the same threats, creating situations where Grey Knight's forces must operate alongside battle brothers who cannot be trusted with knowledge of their true identity and mission. The resolution of these conflicts requires careful diplomatic intervention by Ordo Malleus inquisitors who possess sufficient authority to provide plausible explanations for Grey Knight's presence without revealing classified information. Standard protocols involve identifying the Grey Knights as a specialized Inquisition strike force operating under direct mandate from Terra, their unusual equipment and tactics explained as experimental technologies being field-tested under combat conditions. These cover stories satisfy most inquiries while maintaining the fiction that the Grey Knights represent conventional Imperial forces rather than a completely separate chapter with unique capabilities. More serious conflicts arise when other Space Marine forces witness Grey Knights using obviously non-standard equipment or demonstrating capabilities that contradict established Imperial doctrine. Veteran sergeants and librarians may recognize Nemesis force weapons as variants of technology that should not exist outside specific Adeptus Mechanicus forge worlds, or observe psychic techniques that differ fundamentally from approved librarium training. These situations require immediate intervention by Inquisition personnel who possess authority to classify the observations and prevent their dissemination through normal military reporting channels. The most dangerous political situations occur when Grey Knight's operations intersect with the activities of other Imperial organizations that possess their own secrecy requirements and classification protocols. The Officio Assassinorum occasionally deploys operatives against the same targets as Grey Knight's forces, creating potential conflicts between organizations that cannot openly acknowledge each other's existence or coordinate their activities through normal channels. These situations require resolution through back-channel negotiations between senior inquisitors and Assassinorum handlers who possess sufficient security clearance to discuss operational parameters without compromising either organization's essential secrecy. The Adeptus Custodes represent a particularly complex political challenge for Grey Knight secrecy, as these ancient warriors possess direct access to the Emperor and knowledge of Imperial history that predates most classification protocols. Custodian Guard who encounter Grey Knight's forces during operations on Terra or in the Sol system may recognize equipment patterns or tactical signatures that suggest connections to the Emperor's personal projects during the Heresy era. These encounters require careful management by the highest levels of Imperial authority to prevent unauthorized disclosure of Grey Knight's origins while maintaining the respect and cooperation of the Emperor's personal guardians. The maintenance of Grey Knight secrecy also creates ongoing tensions with the ecclesiarchy, whose senior clergy occasionally encounter references to specialized anti-demon forces in ancient texts or witness unexplained military operations that suggest the existence of Imperial assets beyond their knowledge. Cardinal-level officials who discover evidence of Grey Knight's activities may attempt to investigate these anomalies through their own intelligence networks, creating security risks that require intervention by Inquisition agents embedded within church hierarchies. The resolution of ecclesiarchy inquiries typically involves providing carefully edited information about specialized Inquisition forces, while emphasizing the classified nature of anti-demon operations that require absolute secrecy to maintain their effectiveness. Church officials are reminded of their duty to support Imperial security through discretion rather than investigation, their natural curiosity redirected toward more appropriate theological concerns. In extreme cases, memory modification may be required to prevent senior clergy from retaining dangerous knowledge that could compromise ongoing operations. The long-term sustainability of Grey Knight's secrecy faces increasing challenges as the chapter's operational tempo intensifies in response to growing demon activity across the galaxy. Each major operation creates additional witnesses who require memory modification, generating cumulative risks that could eventually compromise the entire security apparatus through statistical analysis of missing information patterns. Imperial intelligence analysts who specialize in identifying data gaps and classification anomalies represent ongoing threats to Grey Knight secrecy, their investigations potentially capable of revealing the existence of systematic information suppression related to specific types of military operation. The chapter's leadership recognizes these evolving challenges and continuously adapts their security protocols to address new threats to operational secrecy. Recent modifications include the development of more sophisticated memory modification techniques that create more convincing false memories while reducing the psychological side effects experienced by affected personnel. The Grey Knights also work closely with Ordo Malleus forces to identify and monitor Imperial personnel whose positions or capabilities could pose security risks, implementing preemptive measures to prevent unauthorized investigations before they can compromise essential secrecy requirements. The political costs of maintaining Grey Knight secrecy extend beyond simple operational security to encompass broader questions about Imperial governance and the relationship between state authority and individual rights. The systematic memory modification of loyal Imperial citizens raises ethical concerns that challenge fundamental assumptions about personal autonomy and the limits of state power, even within the authoritarian framework of Imperial society. These concerns remain largely theoretical due to the classified nature of the programs involved, but they represent potential sources of political instability if the full extent of memory modification operations ever became public knowledge. The justification for these extreme security measures rests on the argument that knowledge of demonic threats poses existential dangers to Imperial society that transcend normal ethical considerations about personal privacy and autonomy. The Grey Knights and their Inquisition allies maintain that exposure to information about chaos corruption could itself become a vector for demonic influence, making memory modification a form of spiritual protection rather than simple censorship. This reasoning provides the philosophical foundation for security protocols that would be considered extreme even by Imperial standards if applied to conventional military operations. The Grey Knights' operational history spans 10 millennia of warfare against the galaxy's most dangerous supernatural threats, their victories achieved through sacrifice and determination that few Imperial citizens could comprehend. These campaigns tested the chapter's doctrines against enemies whose very existence challenged the fundamental laws of reality, forcing continuous adaptation of tactics and equipment to counter evolving demonic threats. Each major engagement provided lessons that shaped future operations, while demonstrating the absolute necessity of maintaining forces specifically designed to combat chaos incursions that conventional Imperial military assets could not effectively engage. The First War for Armageddon marked one of the Grey Knights' most significant early deployments in the 32nd millennium, when the demon Primarch Angron manifested on the strategically vital Hive world alongside a massive force of World Eaters, traitor Marines, and Cornate demons. The incursion began when corrupt cultists within Armageddon's industrial complexes completed summoning rituals that had been decades in preparation, their ceremonies creating stable warp rifts that allowed the Demon Prince and his followers to establish a permanent foothold in real space. The scale of the manifestation threatened to transform Armageddon into a demon world that could serve as a staging ground for further incursions throughout the surrounding systems. Imperial forces on Armageddon initially attempted to contain the demonic outbreak using conventional military assets, but the presence of a demon Primarch rendered standard tactics completely ineffective. Angron's reality warping aura drove entire regiments of Armageddon Steel Legion troops into berserker frenzies that turned them against their own officers, while his physical presence on the battlefield allowed him to tear through armored formations with supernatural strength that could crush battle tanks with bare hands. The Demon Primarch's strategic intelligence, retained from his original existence as a Primarch, allowed him to coordinate his forces with tactical brilliance that maximized the psychological impact of demonic terror weapons. The Grey Knights' response involved the deployment of multiple brotherhoods under the direct command of Supreme Grand Master Joros, whose experience with Demon Primarch engagements during the Horus Heresy provided crucial tactical insights for the campaign. The chapter's forces arrived through carefully coordinated teleportation strikes that bypassed the reality storms surrounding Angron's stronghold, their sudden appearance catching the demon forces off guard despite their supernatural perception abilities. The initial Grey Knights' assault focused on eliminating the summoning circles that maintained stable warp rifts, preventing Angron from receiving reinforcements while gradually weakening his connection to the material plane. The confrontation between Joros and Angron became the focal point of the entire campaign, as the Demon Primarch's pride compelled him to face the Grey Knights leader in single combat rather than employing hit-and-run tactics that might have proven more effective. The duel took place within the ruins of Hive Acheron, where the Demon Primarch's presence had warped the city's architecture into impossible geometries that defied conventional navigation. Joros wielded ancient weapons that had been blessed by the Emperor personally, their power enhanced by the collective psychic might of his entire brotherhood channeling energy through carefully maintained spiritual links. The battle raged across multiple levels of the Hive City, with Angron's supernatural strength and speed initially overwhelming even the Supreme Grand Master's enhanced capabilities. The Demon Primarch's attacks shattered Ferrocrete walls and twisted steel support beams into abstract sculptures of destruction, his presence causing reality itself to bleed and warp around the combatants. Joros survived the initial assault through perfect application of Grey Knight's defensive techniques, his Aegis armor's protective systems working in harmony with psychic barriers that deflected attacks capable of destroying conventional Terminator suits. The turning point came when Joros managed to wound Angron with a precisely targeted strike that severed one of the Demon Primarch's reality anchors, causing his physical form to become unstable and vulnerable to further spiritual damage. The Grey Knights' forces throughout the Hive City felt their leader's success through their psychic bonds, their collective will focusing on supporting the Supreme Grand Master's final assault against their ancient enemy. The combined psychic pressure from hundreds of Grey Knights warriors created a sanctified zone around the combatants that prevented Angron from drawing additional power from the warp while amplifying Joros' own abilities to superhuman levels. The Demon Primarch's banishment required the Supreme Grand Master to channel enough blessed energy to permanently sever Angron's connection to real space, a feat that left Joros drained to the point of near death, but successfully eliminated the primary threat to Armageddon's population. The remaining World Eater's forces found themselves cut off from their demonic reinforcements and gradually succumbed to concentrated Grey Knights' assaults that exploited their berserker rage through carefully planned tactical maneuvers. The campaign's conclusion required months of purification operations to cleanse the Hive cities of lingering chaos taint, while ensuring that no cultist cells survived to attempt future summoning rituals. The aftermath of the First War for Armageddon created unprecedented challenges for maintaining Grey Knight's operational secrecy, as hundreds of thousands of Armageddon Steel Legion troops had witnessed demonic manifestations and Grey Knight's combat operations during the campaign. The scale of memory modification required exceeded anything previously attempted by Ordo Malleus forces, necessitating the deployment of entire covens of sanctioned psychers working in coordinated shifts to process the affected personnel. The operation took place over several months, with Steel Legion regiments rotated through processing facilities that had been established in requisitioned Imperial Navy vessels to maintain security during the procedures. The memory modification process for Armageddon veterans involved replacing their recollections of demonic encounters with false memories of battles against well-equipped heretical forces, led by a charismatic traitor general whose tactical brilliance explained the unusual challenges faced during the campaign. The substitute memories included appropriate details about enemy equipment and casualties that would satisfy routine military debriefings, while eliminating all references to supernatural threats or Grey Knight's involvement. The scale of the operation required careful coordination to ensure consistency across thousands of individual memory modifications, preventing discrepancies that might prompt investigation by Imperial intelligence services. Several Steel Legion regiments that had been most heavily exposed to demonic corruption required complete memory replacement rather than selective modification, their original recollections so thoroughly contaminated with chaos influence that partial editing would have left dangerous psychological vulnerabilities. These units received entirely fabricated service histories that placed them in different theaters during the time period when the Armageddon campaign actually occurred, their personnel records altered to support the false memories while maintaining their military qualifications and service ratings. The process effectively created new identities for thousands of loyal Imperial soldiers whose only crime had been witnessing threats that exceeded their security clearance. The political ramifications of the Armageddon memory modification operation created tensions within the Imperial hierarchy that persisted for decades after the campaign's conclusion. Senior military commanders who had not been present during the fighting questioned the gaps in operational reports and the unusual casualty patterns reported by units that claimed to have faced conventional enemies. The inconsistencies prompted investigations by administratum auditors, whose inquiries threatened to expose the systematic memory modification program through statistical analysis of missing information patterns. The resolution of these political challenges required intervention by the highest levels of Inquisition authority, including Inquisitor lords who possessed sufficient political influence to classify the entire investigation and redirect official attention toward other matters. The cover-up operation involved the creation of false documentation that supported the modified memories while explaining away inconsistencies through references to classified strategic considerations that exceeded the investigator's security clearance. The success of this deception established precedents for future large-scale memory modification operations while demonstrating the political costs of maintaining Grey Knight secrecy during major campaigns. The Months of Shame represented one of the most serious political crises in Grey Knight's history, arising from conflicts with the Space Wolves chapter over the treatment of Armageddon's civilian population following the First War for Armageddon. The Space Wolves had arrived in the Armageddon system shortly after the Grey Knights' victory, their forces deployed to assist with post-battle cleanup operations, without being informed of the true nature of the threats that had been faced during the campaign. When Space Wolves commanders discovered that Imperial forces were systematically executing civilian populations that had been exposed to demonic influence, they intervened to protect the innocent despite explicit orders from Ordo Malleus inquisitors to allow the purges to continue. The fundamental disagreement centered on different interpretations of Imperial doctrine regarding chaos exposure, with the Space Wolves maintaining that loyal Imperial citizens deserved protection regardless of their involuntary exposure to demonic influence. The Grey Knights and their Inquisition allies argued that any exposure to chaos corruption created unacceptable risks of future demon manifestations that justified extreme measures to prevent the spread of taint throughout the Imperium. The conflict escalated when Space Wolves' forces physically prevented Inquisition execution squads from carrying out their orders, leading to armed confrontations between loyal Imperial forces. The political crisis deepened when Logan Grimnar, the Space Wolves' Great Wolf, formally challenged the authority of Inquisitor Lord Gesme Cisneros to order the execution of civilians who had committed no crimes beyond witnessing events that exceeded their security clearance. Grimnar's position reflected traditional Space Marine doctrines that emphasized the protection of innocent Imperial citizens, while Cisneros maintained that the civilians' exposure to demonic influence made them permanent security risks that could not be contained through conventional means. The standoff created unprecedented tensions between different branches of Imperial authority with equally valid claims to legitimate command authority. The Grey Knights found themselves in the difficult position of supporting Inquisition policies that they understood were necessary for maintaining Imperial security while respecting the Space Wolves' commitment to protecting innocent civilians. Supreme Grand Master Jaros attempted to mediate between the conflicting parties by proposing alternative solutions that would address security concerns without requiring mass executions, including enhanced monitoring programs and selective memory modification for the most severely affected populations. These proposals were rejected by hardline inquisitors who insisted that only complete elimination of potential witnesses could guarantee absolute security. The conflict escalated into open warfare when Space Wolves forces attacked Inquisition facilities where civilian executions were taking place, their assault resulting in significant casualties among Ordo Malleus personnel and the liberation of thousands of condemned civilians. The Grey Knights were ordered to intervene against the Space Wolves, creating the unprecedented situation where two loyal Space Marine chapters faced each other in armed conflict over fundamental questions of Imperial policy and military ethics. The engagement that followed tested both chapters' commitment to their respective interpretations of loyalty to the Emperor while threatening to create permanent divisions within the Adeptus Astartes. The actual combat between Grey Knights and Space Wolves forces demonstrated the tactical challenges involved when specialized anti-demon forces engaged conventional Space Marines in environments where their supernatural advantages provided limited benefits. The Space Wolves' aggressive close combat tactics and pack hunting strategies proved effective against Grey Knights formations that had been optimized for fighting demonic entities rather than fellow Astartes. The engagements resulted in significant casualties on both sides before cooler heads prevailed and negotiated ceasefires that allowed for political resolution of the underlying conflicts. The resolution of the Months of Shame required direct intervention by the High Lords of Terra, whose authority transcended the competing claims of different Imperial organizations, while providing face-saving solutions for all parties involved. The final agreement established new protocols for handling civilian populations exposed to chaos influence that balanced security requirements with humanitarian concerns, creating categories of exposure that determined appropriate responses ranging from memory modification to selective relocation rather than automatic execution. The Accord also established clearer command structures for joint operations involving multiple Imperial organizations with overlapping authority. The political aftermath of the Months of Shame created lasting changes in Grey Knight's operational procedures, including enhanced coordination with other Space Marine chapters and more careful consideration of the political implications of their security requirements. The chapter's leadership recognized that their absolute secrecy requirements could create conflicts with other Imperial forces, whose own doctrines emphasized different priorities, necessitating more sophisticated approaches to managing inter-organizational relationships during joint operations. The Third War for Armageddon in the late 41st millennium presented the Grey Knights with fundamentally different challenges, as they faced simultaneous threats from Orc forces under Warlord Gozkul Mag Uruk Thraka and opportunistic chaos incursions that exploited the massive warfare consuming the planet. The scale of the conflict dwarfed previous Armageddon campaigns, with millions of Imperial Guard troops and dozens of Space Marine chapters deployed against Orc forces, whose numbers seemed endless despite continuous attrition from sustained combat operations. The Grey Knights' involvement focused primarily on countering chaos forces that attempted to exploit the massive psychic disturbances generated by the ongoing warfare. The presence of so many combatants on Armageddon created psychic resonances that attracted demonic attention from across the galaxy, as the emotional energies generated by constant warfare provided ideal conditions for warp manifestations. Cornate demons fed on the rage and bloodlust permeating the planet's atmosphere, while Nurglite entities thrived in the disease-ridden conditions created by millions of casualties and inadequate medical facilities. The Grey Knights found themselves fighting a multi-front campaign against different types of demonic threat, while coordinating with conventional Imperial forces whose primary focus remained the Orc invasion. The chapter's operations during the Third War for Armageddon emphasized rapid response capabilities that allowed small Grey Knights forces to eliminate emerging demonic threats before they could establish permanent footholds in real space. Teleportation strikes proved particularly effective in the chaotic battlefield conditions, as conventional transportation methods were frequently disrupted by Orc air attacks and artillery bombardments that made surface movement extremely hazardous. The Grey Knights developed new tactical doctrines that integrated their anti-demon capabilities with conventional warfare requirements, creating hybrid approaches that maximized their effectiveness in complex operational environments. One of the most significant Grey Knights' engagements during the Third War occurred when a greater demon of Khorne manifested within the ruins of Hive Tartarus, its presence threatening to corrupt the massive refugee populations that had sought shelter in the Hive's lower levels. The demon's reality-warping aura began transforming civilian refugees into berserker cultists whose rage-fueled attacks spread chaos throughout the Hive's defensive positions. Grey Knights' forces under Brotherhood Captain Stern launched an immediate assault against the greater demon, their teleportation capabilities allowing them to bypass the corrupted civilian populations while engaging the primary threat directly. The battle within Hive Tartarus demonstrated the Grey Knights' ability to adapt their standard anti-demon tactics to urban warfare conditions where collateral damage could affect millions of innocent civilians. Captain Stern's forces employed precision psychic attacks that targeted the greater demon's spiritual anchors without generating the explosive effects that typically accompanied their weapons when used in open battlefield conditions. The engagement required exceptional skill and restraint, as the Grey Knights needed to eliminate a powerful supernatural threat while protecting the very populations that the demon was attempting to corrupt. The 13th Black Crusade represented the culmination of Abaddon, the Despoiler's 10,000-year campaign against the Imperium, bringing together the largest Chaos fleet in recorded history for a coordinated assault on the Cadian Gate that threatened to breach the barriers containing the Eye of Terror. The Grey Knights' response involved the deployment of the chapter's entire strength in a desperate attempt to prevent Chaos forces from achieving their strategic objectives, while maintaining their traditional secrecy requirements despite the unprecedented scale of the conflict. The campaign tested every aspect of Grey Knights' doctrine and equipment against enemies whose power and numbers exceeded anything previously encountered in Imperial history. The initial phases of the 13th Black Crusade saw Grey Knights' forces deployed across multiple star systems simultaneously, their rapid response capabilities allowing them to counter demonic incursions that supported Abaddon's conventional military operations. The chapter's brotherhoods operated independently across vast distances, their coordination maintained through psychic communication networks that bypassed the conventional astropathic systems disrupted by the massive warp storms emanating from the Eye of Terror. Each brotherhood faced threats that would have challenged the entire chapter's resources during previous conflicts, forcing individual commanders to make tactical decisions with galaxy-spanning consequences. The defense of Cadia itself required Grey Knights' forces to operate alongside the largest concentration of Imperial military assets ever assembled, creating unprecedented challenges for maintaining operational secrecy while coordinating with conventional forces whose commanders lacked security clearance for classified information about the chapter's capabilities. The Grey Knights adapted their standard protocols to allow limited cooperation with other Imperial forces while maintaining essential security barriers, their operations explained as specialized Inquisition assets, whose unusual equipment and tactics were classified beyond the clearance levels of field commanders. The Grey Knights' most crucial contribution to the Cadian defense involved the elimination of greater demons, whose presence on the battlefield would have rendered conventional Imperial forces ineffective through terror and corruption effects. These engagements took place across the planet's surface, as Chaos forces attempted to establish summoning circles that could bring demon princes and other powerful entities into real space, where they could support Abaddon's assault on the pylons that maintained the Cadian Gate's stability. The chapter's forces fought desperate battles against enemies whose victory would have doomed not just Cadia, but the entire Imperium to inevitable conquest by Chaos forces. The fall of Cadia marked a strategic defeat for Imperial forces despite the Grey Knights' heroic efforts, as Abaddon's forces succeeded in destroying enough pylons to destabilize the barriers that had contained warp storms for millennia. The Grey Knights evacuated alongside other Imperial survivors, their teleportation capabilities allowing them to extract personnel and equipment that would have been lost if they had relied on conventional transportation methods. The chapter's survival ensured that their accumulated knowledge and experience remained available for future campaigns against the Chaos forces that now threaten the entire galaxy through the expanding Great Rift. The aftermath of the 13th Black Crusade created new operational challenges for the Grey Knights, as the Great Rift's expansion generated demon incursions across thousands of worlds simultaneously, stretching the chapter's resources beyond their ability to respond to every threat. The Grey Knights adapted their deployment strategies to focus on the most critical incursions, while working more closely with other Imperial organizations to coordinate responses to secondary threats. The chapter's role evolved from serving as the Imperium's primary anti-demon force to becoming the elite specialists who handled threats too dangerous for conventional assets, while training and supporting other organizations in basic demon fighting techniques. These major campaigns demonstrated the Grey Knight's evolution from a secretive chapter focused on eliminating specific demonic threats to a crucial component of the Imperium's overall defense strategy against chaos forces, whose activities had become too widespread to contain through traditional secrecy-based approaches. Each conflict provided lessons that shaped the chapter's future development, while proving their absolute necessity for Imperial survival in a galaxy where demonic threats had become commonplace rather than exceptional occurrences. The annals of the Grey Knights chronicle warriors whose deeds transcend even the extraordinary standards expected of the Emperor's demon hunters, individuals whose names are spoken in hushed reverence within the chapter's most sacred halls, while remaining unknown to the broader Imperium. These legendary figures have faced the galaxy's most dangerous supernatural threats and emerged victorious through combinations of martial prowess, psychic mastery, and spiritual purity that elevate them beyond their already exceptional battle brothers. Their stories serve as inspiration for future generations of Grey Knights, while demonstrating the heights of achievement possible for those who dedicate their existence entirely to the Emperor's service against the forces of chaos. Supreme Grand Master Kaldor Drago stands as perhaps the most legendary figure in Grey Knight's history, his name synonymous with absolute dedication to the war against chaos, despite the terrible price he has paid for his victories. Drago's ascension to the chapter's highest rank came through a combination of tactical brilliance, psychic mastery, and spiritual purity that impressed even the ancient warriors who had served since the chapter's founding. His early career included numerous successful campaigns against greater demons and demon princes, each victory adding to his reputation as a warrior capable of facing the galaxy's most dangerous entities without flinching or compromising his absolute loyalty to the Emperor's cause. The defining moment of Drago's legend occurred during his confrontation with Emkar the Reborn, a demon prince whose malevolent intelligence had orchestrated countless atrocities across Imperial space over millennia of existence. Emkar had achieved something approaching tactical genius through his corruption, combining the strategic thinking of his original mortal existence with supernatural powers that allowed him to manipulate entire campaigns from behind the scenes. The Demon Prince's schemes typically involved corrupting Imperial commanders through subtle influence, turning loyal officers into unwitting pawns who would make decisions that served chaos interests while believing they acted in the Imperium's best interests. Drago's pursuit of Emkar began when Grey Knight's intelligence analysts identified patterns in Imperial military disasters that suggested coordinated manipulation by a single malevolent intelligence. The investigation revealed Emkar's involvement in dozens of campaigns where Imperial forces had suffered unexpected defeats despite possessing overwhelming tactical advantages, their failures consistently benefiting chaos forces operating in the same regions. Drago recognized that eliminating this threat required more than conventional military action, as Emkar's ability to operate through corruption and manipulation made him nearly impossible to engage through standard Grey Knight's tactics. The confrontation between Drago and Emkar took place within the Demon Prince's fortress on a world that existed partially within the warp, its reality constantly shifting according to the Master's will. The fortress itself served as an extension of Emkar's power, its architecture changing continuously to confuse and disorient intruders while channeling demonic energy that strengthened its master's abilities. Drago approached the stronghold alone, recognizing that the Demon Prince's reality warping capabilities would make conventional assault tactics ineffective, while potentially endangering any Grey Knights who accompanied him into the shifting maze of corrupted stone and twisted metal. The battle that followed tested every aspect of Drago's training and spiritual conditioning, as Emkar employed psychological warfare alongside his physical attacks, attempting to corrupt the Supreme Grand Master through revelations about the futility of Imperial resistance against chaos. The Demon Prince's arguments carried the weight of millennia of experience, his words designed to exploit any doubts or weaknesses in Drago's faith, while his claws and reality-warping attacks threatened physical destruction. The combat raged through chambers, where the laws of physics changed according to Emkar's will, forcing Drago to adapt constantly to environments where his weapons might suddenly become ineffective or his armor could transform into restraining bonds. Drago's victory over Emkar came through the application of techniques that had been developed specifically for combating entities whose power derived from psychological manipulation rather than simple physical strength. The Supreme Grand Master channeled his psychic abilities through prayers and mantras that created zones of spiritual stability within the Demon Prince's reality, warped fortress, establishing footholds of normal space-time that allowed him to fight effectively despite the constantly changing environment. His nemesis Force Sword, enhanced by decades of blessing and personal attunement, proved capable of wounding Emkar's spiritual essence while disrupting the reality anchors that maintained the Demon Prince's physical form. The decisive moment came when Drago managed to carve his predecessor's name into Emkar's heart, a symbolic act that carried profound spiritual significance within Grey Knight's tradition. The inscription served as both a memorial to the previous Supreme Grand Master, who had fallen to the Demon Prince's schemes, and a binding that weakened Emkar's connection to the material plane. The act required Drago to channel enormous amounts of blessed energy through his weapon, while maintaining perfect spiritual focus, despite the Demon Prince's desperate attempts to corrupt or destroy him through direct psychic assault. Emkar's banishment created a psychic backlash that trapped Drago within the warp itself, his consciousness cast into the Sea of Souls, where he became locked in eternal combat against the forces of chaos. Unlike normal humans who would be instantly destroyed or corrupted by exposure to the warp's raw energy, Drago's spiritual purity and psychic conditioning allowed him to maintain his identity and purpose while fighting an endless war against demons in their own realm. His imprisonment represented both victory and sacrifice, as his defeat of Emkar eliminated a major threat to Imperial security while removing one of the Grey Knight's greatest champions from active service. Within the warp, Drago exists in a state of constant warfare that tests his abilities against enemies whose power is magnified by their presence in their native realm. The demon forces he faces include not only the servants of the Chaos Gods, but also entities that exist purely within the immaterial realm, their forms and capabilities defying classification by Imperial scholars who study such matters from the safety of real space. Drago's battles take place across landscapes that shift according to the emotional resonances of their inhabitants, creating environments where victory requires not just martial prowess, but absolute spiritual discipline that prevents the warrior's own thoughts from reshaping reality in ways that benefit his enemies. The Supreme Grand Master's survival within the warp depends on his ability to maintain perfect faith and purpose despite isolation from the Emperor's guiding presence and the support of his battle brothers. His consciousness exists as a beacon of Imperial virtue within the Sea of Souls, its presence creating ripples that affect demon activities across vast regions of warp space. The very fact of his continued existence serves as inspiration for other Imperial forces, while demonstrating that even the most dire circumstances cannot corrupt those whose dedication to the Emperor transcends normal human limitations. Drago's occasional manifestations in real space occur during moments when the barriers between dimensions weaken sufficiently to allow his temporary return to the material plane. These appearances typically coincide with critical battles, where his intervention proves decisive, his knowledge of warp dynamics allowing him to strike at demon forces with precision that exceeds even normal Grey Knight's capabilities. His presence during these manifestations carries the accumulated power of his eternal warfare within the warp, making him capable of banishing greater demons through single sword strokes, while inspiring nearby Imperial forces through his example of absolute dedication to duty. The legend of Kaldor Drago serves multiple purposes within Grey Knight's culture, providing both inspiration for current warriors and a reminder of the prices that may be required for victory against the forces of chaos. His story demonstrates that even the most accomplished Grey Knights may face sacrifices that exceed normal concepts of duty and service, while his continued resistance within the warp proves that spiritual purity can triumph over any environment or circumstance. The Supreme Grand Master's example influences Grey Knight's training and doctrine, with his techniques and tactical approaches studied by every generation of demon hunters who follow in his footsteps. Grand Master Vorth Mordrak represents a different aspect of Grey Knight's legend, his story encompassing both personal tragedy and supernatural determination that allows him to continue serving the Emperor despite losses that would destroy lesser warriors. Mordrak's early career followed conventional patterns for Grey Knight's advancement, his tactical abilities and spiritual purity earning recognition from his superiors, while his combat record demonstrated consistent success against a variety of demonic threats. His promotion to Grand Master rank reflected not just personal achievement, but the respect of his peers who recognized his potential for leading entire brotherhoods against the galaxy's most dangerous enemies. The defining tragedy of Mordrak's existence occurred during the Deimos campaign, when his entire brotherhood was annihilated while attempting to prevent a massive demon incursion that threatened to consume multiple star systems. The battle took place on a world whose surface had been corrupted by decades of chaos influence, its atmosphere poisoned by demonic presence, while its geography shifted according to the will of the greater demons who had claimed it as their domain. Mordrak's brotherhood had been deployed to eliminate the summoning circles that maintained stable warp rifts, their mission requiring them to fight through environments where reality itself had become unreliable. The Brotherhood's destruction came through a coordinated assault by multiple greater demons, whose combined power overwhelmed even the Grey Knight's formidable defenses. Mordrak watched his battle brothers fall one by one to enemies whose capabilities exceeded anything they had previously encountered, their deaths occurring despite perfect execution of tactics that had proven successful in countless previous engagements. The Grand Master's survival came at the cost of witnessing the elimination of warriors whose loyalty and courage had been tested through decades of service alongside him, their loss creating wounds in his psyche that would never fully heal. The psychic trauma of losing his entire brotherhood created an unprecedented phenomenon within Mordrak's consciousness, as his grief and determination combined with his enhanced psychic abilities to maintain spiritual connections with his fallen battle brothers. The dead Grey Knight's souls, bound to their Grand Master through loyalty that transcended death itself, manifested as ghostly warriors who fought alongside Mordrak in subsequent battles. These spectral figures retained their combat skills and tactical knowledge while gaining supernatural abilities that made them even more effective against demonic enemies than they had been in life. The Ghosts of Deimos, as these manifestations became known within Grey Knight's lore, appear as translucent figures clad in the armor they wore at the moment of their deaths, their forms crackling with psychic energy that allows them to interact with both material and spiritual enemies. Their weapons carry the same blessed properties they possessed in life, while gaining additional capabilities that allow them to wound entities that exist purely within the warp's immaterial realm. The Ghost's presence on battlefields creates zones of sanctified energy that strengthen living Grey Knights while weakening demonic opponents through their proximity to beings who have transcended normal death while maintaining absolute loyalty to the Emperor. Mordrak's command of these spectral warriors requires constant expenditure of psychic energy that would exhaust normal psychers within minutes, but his enhanced capabilities and spiritual connection to his fallen brotherhood allow him to maintain their manifestation for extended periods during combat operations. The process involves channeling his own life force through the psychic bonds that connect him to his dead battle brothers, creating a form of spiritual communion that allows the living and dead to coordinate their actions with precision that exceeds normal Grey Knight's capabilities. The tactical advantages provided by the Ghosts of Deimos extend beyond simple numerical reinforcement to include capabilities that living warriors cannot replicate. The spectral Grey Knights can pass through solid barriers to strike at enemies from unexpected angles, their immaterial nature allowing them to bypass conventional defenses while maintaining the ability to inflict real damage on both physical and spiritual targets. Their presence also creates psychological effects that prove particularly effective against demon opponents, as even entities that exist partially outside reality find encounters with the honored dead unsettling in ways that affect their combat performance. Mordrak's continued service, despite his traumatic losses, demonstrates the depths of dedication possible within Grey Knight's culture, as his determination to honor his fallen brothers through continued warfare against chaos has sustained him through centuries of additional campaigns. His tactical expertise, enhanced by the counsel of his ghostly companions who provide perspectives unavailable to purely living commanders, has made him one of the chapter's most effective leaders against supernatural threats that require unconventional approaches. The Grand Master's example influences Grey Knight's doctrine regarding loss and sacrifice, showing that even the most devastating defeats can be transformed into sources of strength through absolute commitment to the Emperor's service. The psychological aspects of Mordrak's condition remain subjects of intense study within the chapter's archives, as his ability to maintain spiritual connections with the dead while remaining free from corruption represents an unprecedented phenomenon in Grey Knight's history. The Grand Master's consciousness exists in a state of constant communion with his fallen warriors, their presence providing both comfort and tactical advantage while requiring continuous mental discipline to prevent the spiritual strain from overwhelming his sanity. His success in maintaining this balance demonstrates levels of psychic control and spiritual purity that serve as inspiration for other Grey Knights who face similar losses during their service. Brother Captain Arven Stern has earned his legendary status through repeated confrontations with some of the Grey Knight's most persistent demonic enemies, his combat record encompassing victories against entities whose names are spoken only in the chapter's most secure archives. Stern's career spans multiple centuries of active service, during which he has developed specialized techniques for combating specific types of greater demon, while maintaining the tactical flexibility necessary for adapting to new threats as they emerge. His expertise encompasses not just martial prowess, but detailed knowledge of demonic hierarchies and capabilities that makes him invaluable for planning operations against supernatural enemies whose behavior patterns remain consistent across multiple encounters. The Brother Captain's most famous recurring enemy is the bloodthirster known as Angrath the Unbound, whose massive size and reality warping capabilities make it one of the most dangerous entities in Khorne's service. This greater demon's manifestations typically coincide with major Imperial military campaigns, where the emotional energies generated by massive warfare provide ideal conditions for its appearance in real space. Angrath's presence on battlefields creates cascading effects that transform conventional military engagements into apocalyptic conflicts, where the normal rules of warfare become irrelevant due to the demon's ability to manipulate reality according to its master's violent nature. Stern's encounters with Angrath began during the Tertius Prime campaign, when the Bloodthirster manifested within an Imperial Guard staging area and began corrupting entire regiments through its rage-inducing aura. The Brother Captain led a strike force that engaged the greater demon in direct combat, their initial assault demonstrating both the effectiveness of Grey Knight's anti-demon tactics and the exceptional challenges posed by opponents whose power exceeded normal parameters for such entities. The battle required Stern to coordinate his force's psychic abilities while engaging Angrath in personal combat that tested his skills against an opponent whose strength could crush Terminator armor through casual contact. The Brother Captain's victory in their first encounter came through tactical innovation that exploited Angrath's berserker nature, using carefully planned maneuvers that channeled the demon's rage into attacks against its own summoning circles rather than Grey Knight's forces. Stern's understanding of Khornate's psychology allowed him to predict the Bloodthirster's responses to specific provocations, creating opportunities for his strike force to damage the reality anchors that maintain the demon's presence in the material plane. The engagement concluded with Angrath's banishment back to the warp, but not before the greater demon had marked Stern as a particular enemy whose future destruction would bring special satisfaction to its master. Subsequent encounters between Stern and Angrath have occurred across multiple theaters of war, each battle providing the brother captain with additional insights into the Bloodthirster's capabilities, while demonstrating the demon's growing obsession with destroying its Grey Knight's nemesis. These engagements have taken place on worlds whose surfaces have been transformed by demonic presence, within space hulks where reality becomes unreliable due to warp exposure, and during void battles where both combatants have had to adapt their techniques to environments that provide no atmosphere or gravity. Each confrontation has tested different aspects of Stern's abilities, while proving that even the most powerful demons can be consistently defeated through proper application of Grey Knight's doctrine. The brother captain's tactical innovations during these repeated encounters have influenced Grey Knight's combat doctrine regarding persistent demonic threats, as his experiences demonstrate the importance of maintaining detailed records about specific entities whose capabilities and behavior patterns remain consistent across multiple manifestations. Stern's methods for combating Angrath have been codified into training protocols that prepare other Grey Knights for similar encounters, while providing frameworks for adapting these techniques to different types of greater demon. His success against such a powerful recurring enemy serves as proof that no demonic entity, regardless of its individual strength, can ultimately triumph over Grey Knights who maintain perfect discipline and tactical flexibility. The psychological aspects of Stern's repeated confrontations with Angrath demonstrate the mental resilience required for Grey Knights who face the same enemies multiple times across their careers. The brother captain's ability to maintain tactical objectivity, despite the personal nature of his conflict with the Bloodthirster, reflects training and spiritual conditioning that allows him to view even the most dangerous opponents as problems to be solved rather than personal threats to be feared. His example influences Grey Knight's doctrine regarding the emotional management necessary for effective demon hunting, showing that even legendary enemies can be approached with the same methodical precision applied to any other tactical challenge. Grand Master Aldrich Valdis commands the Third Brotherhood with authority derived from psychic mastery that exceeds even the considerable abilities expected of Grey Knight's leaders. His ascension to Grand Master rank came through demonstration of psychic techniques that pushed the boundaries of what had previously been considered possible within the chapter's traditions, his innovations expanding the tactical options available to Grey Knight's forces while maintaining the spiritual safety that prevented corruption through excessive warp exposure. Valdis's leadership style emphasizes the development of psychic potential in his subordinates, creating a brotherhood whose collective capabilities exceed the sum of their individual abilities through carefully coordinated channeling techniques. The Grand Master's psychic specialization encompasses both offensive and defensive applications that make his brotherhood particularly effective against enemies who rely on reality-warping attacks or supernatural defenses. His mastery of the sanctic discipline allows him to channel blessed energy with precision that can eliminate specific threats without affecting nearby allies or innocent civilians, creating surgical strikes that resolve complex tactical situations without collateral damage. Valdis's defensive techniques create protective barriers that can shield entire formations from psychic attacks, while allowing friendly forces to operate effectively despite exposure to reality warping effects generated by greater demon presence. Valdis's tactical innovations include the development of coordinated psychic attacks that involve his entire brotherhood channeling their abilities through his enhanced consciousness, creating effects that rival the power of ancient archaeotech weapons while maintaining the spiritual purity that prevents chaos corruption. These techniques require exceptional trust and coordination between the Grand Master and his subordinates, as the psychic links necessary for such channeling create temporary vulnerabilities that could be exploited by enemies with sufficient knowledge of Grey Knight's capabilities. The successful implementation of these tactics demonstrates both Valdis's individual mastery and his ability to inspire absolute confidence in warriors whose own abilities place them among the Imperium's most elite forces. The Third Brotherhood's combat record under Valdis's leadership includes victories against some of the most challenging demonic threats faced by the Grey Knights in recent centuries, their successes achieved through innovative applications of psychic power that have influenced chapter-wide tactical doctrine. The Grand Master's approach to demon hunting emphasizes understanding the spiritual mechanics that allow chaos entities to manifest in real space, using this knowledge to develop countermeasures that attack the fundamental nature of demonic existence rather than simply overwhelming opponents through superior firepower. His methods have proven particularly effective against entities whose power derives from specific types of chaos corruption, allowing targeted responses that eliminate threats while minimizing the resources required for successful operations. These legendary figures represent the pinnacle of Grey Knight's achievement, their individual stories demonstrating different aspects of the dedication and sacrifice required for effective service against the forces of chaos. Their examples continue to influence current generations of demon hunters while providing tactical innovations that enhance the chapter's effectiveness against evolving supernatural threats. The legacy of these heroes serves as both inspiration and instruction, showing that even the most impossible challenges can be overcome through perfect application of Grey Knight's doctrine, combined with individual excellence that transcends normal limitations. The opening of the Great Rift in the late 41st millennium fundamentally transformed the operational environment that the Grey Knights had navigated for 10 millennia, creating challenges that tested every aspect of their doctrine while forcing adaptations that would have been unthinkable during earlier periods of Imperial history. The massive warp storm that split the galaxy in half generated demon incursions on a scale that dwarfed previous chaos manifestations, with thousands of worlds simultaneously experiencing breaches that conventional Imperial forces proved incapable of containing. The Grey Knights found themselves stretched beyond their traditional operational limits as they attempted to respond to threats that exceeded their capacity for direct intervention while maintaining the absolute secrecy that had protected them since their founding. The immediate aftermath of the Great Rift's formation saw Grey Knights brotherhoods deployed across multiple sectors simultaneously, their forces scattered across vast distances as they attempted to contain the most critical demon incursions while gathering intelligence about the changing nature of warp activity throughout the galaxy. The traditional approach of deploying entire brotherhoods against individual threats became impossible when faced with hundreds of simultaneous emergencies, forcing the chapter to develop new tactical doctrines that emphasized smaller strike forces operating independently across broader areas. These adapted formations typically consisted of single squads or combat teams that possessed sufficient firepower and psychic capability to eliminate specific threats without requiring the support structures that had characterized previous Grey Knights operations. The communications challenges created by the Great Rift's interference with astropathic transmission forced the Grey Knights to rely more heavily on their own psychic abilities for coordination between dispersed forces. The chapter's librarians developed enhanced techniques for maintaining contact across the warp storms that disrupted conventional Imperial communication networks, their abilities allowing isolated strike forces to coordinate their actions despite operating in regions where normal military units would have been completely cut off from higher command authority. These psychic communication networks proved essential for maintaining tactical coherence when individual Grey Knights formations faced threats that required rapid reinforcement or extraction from untenable positions. The increased demon activity across the Imperium Nihilus created unprecedented opportunities for the Grey Knights to study chaos entities in their natural environments, as the weakened barriers between real space and the warp allowed for observations of demonic behavior patterns that had previously been impossible to conduct safely. Chapter librarians established monitoring stations in regions where reality remained stable despite proximity to major warp storms, their research providing insights into demon hierarchies and manifestation mechanics that enhanced the effectiveness of Grey Knight's operations against specific entity types. This intelligence gathering represented a significant evolution in the chapter's approach to demon hunting, shifting from reactive responses to individual threats toward proactive analysis of broader chaos patterns that could predict future incursion attempts. The political implications of widespread demon activity forced the Grey Knights to reconsider their traditional secrecy requirements, as the scale of chaos manifestations made it impossible to maintain the fiction that such threats did not exist. Imperial Guard commanders, who had previously received sanitized briefings about unspecified enemies, now faced obvious demon incursions that could not be explained through conventional military terminology. The chapter adapted by providing limited training to selected Imperial forces about basic anti-demon techniques, while maintaining classification of their own capabilities and organizational structure, creating a middle ground that enhanced overall Imperial effectiveness without compromising essential security requirements. The recruitment challenges created by galaxy-wide warfare forced the Grey Knights to expand their candidate identification networks while maintaining the spiritual purity standards that had protected the chapter from corruption throughout its history. The massive casualties suffered by Imperial forces during the opening phases of the era in Indomitus created larger populations of potential recruits who had been exposed to demon activity and survived without corruption. But the increased availability of candidates was offset by the greater risks involved in operating recruitment networks across war-torn regions, where chaos influence remained strong. Chapter recruiters developed enhanced screening techniques that could identify suitable candidates more rapidly, while ensuring that accelerated selection processes did not compromise the spiritual testing that remained essential for preventing infiltration by corrupted individuals. The gene seed purity that had remained constant throughout the Grey Knights' history faced new challenges as the chapter's accelerated operational tempo created pressures for faster recruitment and training cycles. The apothecaries responsible for maintaining the chapter's genetic integrity developed modified implantation procedures that could produce fully operational Grey Knights in shorter timeframes, without compromising the spiritual conditioning that protected them from chaos corruption. These adaptations involved enhanced psychic screening during the gene seed implantation process and accelerated indoctrination techniques that compressed traditional training programs while maintaining their essential elements. The fortress monastery on Titan underwent significant modifications to accommodate the chapter's expanded operational requirements, with new training facilities and equipment production capabilities that could support larger numbers of Grey Knights while maintaining the security protocols that protected the moon from external observation. The construction projects involved the excavation of additional chambers deep within Titan's structure, their architecture incorporating the same protective geometries and psychic wards that had safeguarded the original facilities, while providing space for the expanded archives and libraries necessary to catalog the intelligence being gathered about demon activity across the galaxy. The relationship between the Grey Knights and other Imperial organizations evolved significantly during the era in Indomitus, as the widespread nature of demon threats made cooperation essential for effective responses to major chaos incursions. The chapter began working more closely with Space Marine chapters, whose own operational areas had been affected by demon activity, providing training and equipment that enhanced their allies' capabilities against supernatural threats, while maintaining appropriate security barriers about Grey Knight's methods and organization. These partnerships typically involved Grey Knight specialists serving as advisors during joint operations, their expertise helping conventional Space Marine forces adapt their tactics for combat against enemies whose capabilities exceeded normal parameters. The Inquisition's relationship with the Grey Knights deepened during this period, as Ordo Malleus forces found themselves overwhelmed by the scale of demon activity that required investigation and response across multiple sectors simultaneously. Grey Knights librarians began serving as permanent attachments to Inquisition strike forces, their presence providing both military capability and expertise about demon behavior that proved essential for successful operations against chaos cults and summoning circles. These arrangements required careful negotiation to balance the Inquisition's authority over anti-demon operations with the Grey Knights' operational independence and security requirements. The threat posed by the return of demon primarchs during the era Indomitus represented the most serious challenge faced by the Grey Knights since their founding. As these entities possessed power levels that exceeded anything the chapter had previously encountered, while retaining the tactical intelligence that had made them formidable opponents during the Horus Heresy. Magnus the Red's manifestation on Prospero and subsequent campaigns demonstrated capabilities that rendered conventional Grey Knights tactics inadequate, forcing the chapter to develop new approaches that could counter opponents whose reality-warping abilities operated on planetary scales, while their strategic thinking allowed them to anticipate and counter traditional Imperial responses. The Grey Knights' preparation for confronting demon primarchs involved extensive study of historical records from the Horus Heresy period, with chapter scholars analyzing the tactical approaches that had proven effective against the original primarchs before their corruption. This research revealed that successful engagements with such powerful entities required coordination between multiple Imperial organizations rather than relying solely on Grey Knights' capabilities, leading to the development of joint operational doctrines that integrated chapter assets with Adeptus Custodes forces, loyal Space Marine chapters, and specialized Inquisition resources. The tactical innovations developed for demon primarch engagement emphasized the use of coordinated psychic attacks that could disrupt the reality anchors, maintaining their presence in real space, while conventional forces provided supporting fire and tactical diversions. These operations required unprecedented levels of cooperation between different Imperial organizations, with Grey Knights serving as the primary anti-demon specialists, while their allies provided the numerical strength and diverse capabilities necessary for engaging opponents whose individual power could challenge entire armies. The successful implementation of these tactics during the defense of several key Imperial worlds demonstrated that even demon primarchs could be defeated through proper coordination and tactical innovation. The expansion of chaos activity throughout the galaxy created opportunities for the Grey Knights to establish forward operating bases in regions that had previously been considered too dangerous for permanent Imperial presence. These facilities typically consisted of heavily fortified monitoring stations that could track demon activity across entire sectors, while providing staging areas for rapid response operations against emerging threats. The bases incorporated the same protective technologies used in Titan's Fortress Monastery, while remaining small enough to avoid detection by chaos forces operating in the same regions. The intelligence networks established through these forward bases provided the Grey Knights with unprecedented visibility into demon activities across the galaxy, their monitoring capabilities revealing patterns of chaos activity that suggested coordinated campaigns rather than random manifestations. This intelligence proved crucial for predicting major demon incursions before they could establish permanent footholds in real space, allowing Grey Knights forces to intervene during the vulnerable early phases when summoning circles could still be disrupted through conventional assault tactics. The technological adaptations required for operating in the changed galactic environment led to innovations in Grey Knights' equipment that enhanced their effectiveness against the evolved demon threats emerging from the Great Rift. Weapons artificers developed enhanced Nemesis Force weapons that incorporated additional psychic focusing elements, their improved designs allowing warriors to channel greater amounts of blessed energy while maintaining the precision necessary for surgical strikes against specific demon vulnerabilities. The new weapons proved particularly effective against the reality-warped entities that had begun manifesting in regions where the barriers between dimensions had become permanently weakened. Armor modifications included enhanced psychic shielding systems that could protect Grey Knights from the intensified warp energies present in regions affected by the Great Rift's expansion. The improved protection systems allowed warriors to operate effectively in environments where normal Space Marines would suffer immediate corruption or psychological breakdown, extending the chapter's operational range into areas that had previously been considered inaccessible to Imperial forces. These technological improvements were carefully tested to ensure they maintained compatibility with existing Grey Knights doctrine, while providing the enhanced capabilities necessary for effective operations in the transformed galactic environment. The training programs conducted on Titan evolved to address the new types of demon threats that had emerged following the Great Rift's formation, with combat scenarios that simulated the reality-warped environments and enhanced demon capabilities that Grey Knights forces were encountering across their expanded operational areas. The enhanced training included exposure to controlled manifestations of the new demon types, allowing recruits to develop appropriate tactical responses while remaining protected by the Fortress Monastery's extensive ward systems. These training innovations ensured that newly created Grey Knights possessed the skills necessary for effective service in the transformed galactic environment while maintaining the spiritual purity that protected them from corruption. The chapter's organizational structure adapted to accommodate the increased operational tempo and expanded mission requirements through the creation of specialized formations that could respond to specific types of demon threat more effectively than traditional Brotherhood deployments. These task forces typically combined warriors from multiple Brotherhoods whose individual specializations complemented each other, creating units that possessed enhanced capabilities against particular demon types while maintaining the tactical flexibility necessary for adapting to unexpected threats during combat operations. As the era Indomitus progressed and the Imperium adapted to the reality of permanent galaxy-wide chaos activity, the Grey Knights evolved from a secretive organization focused on eliminating specific threats into a crucial component of the Imperium's overall defense strategy against supernatural enemies. Their role expanded to include training other Imperial forces in basic anti-demon techniques, providing expertise for major military operations against Chaos forces, and serving as the elite specialists who handled threats too dangerous for conventional assets to engage effectively. The Grey Knight's legacy after 10 millennia of service stands as testament to the Emperor's foresight in creating warriors specifically designed to combat the galaxy's most dangerous supernatural threats. Their absolute incorruptibility and specialized capabilities have proven essential for Imperial survival during periods when demon activity threatened to overwhelm conventional military responses, while their continued evolution demonstrates the adaptability necessary for effective service across changing operational environments. The chapter's dedication to their sacred mission remains absolute, their warriors continuing to serve as the Emperor's ultimate weapon against the forces of chaos, regardless of the personal costs or sacrifices required for victory. The future challenges facing the Grey Knights include the ongoing threat of demon Primarch manifestations, the management of expanded demon activity across the galaxy, and the maintenance of their essential capabilities while adapting to operational requirements that continue to evolve as the Imperium faces new forms of chaos corruption. Their success in meeting these challenges will determine not only their own survival, but the continued existence of the Imperium itself, as the forces they were created to combat have become more dangerous and widespread than ever before in Imperial history. The Grey Knights stand ready to face whatever horrors the galaxy may produce, their silver armor gleaming with blessed radiance as they continue their eternal war against the darkness that threatens to consume all of humanity's achievements across the stars.